Chapter 628. The appearance of the resurrection coin and its high selling price had become a hot topic among the players recently. What the players were most concerned about was the cost of making the resurrection coin. From her point of view, if the cost was low, then the seller was definitely a profiteer with such a high selling price. However, only Mo Xiaoxin and a few others knew that it was not expensive. After all, the cost was there. 750,000 soul coins could only be used to brew 2 batches. Even if the highest output of each batch was 15 bottles, the price of each bottle would be around 25,000 soul coins. That was the lowest cost without taking into account the failure. Not to mention that it was impossible to produce a maximum of 15 bottles every time. Therefore, if the price of a bottle of Soul Prayer wine was sold at double the cost plus 10,000 soul coins, there was a risk that he and Chu Zue would suffer a loss. However, Mo Xiaoxin thought that the technology would slowly mature, and if the price of the Soul Prayer wine was too high, it would easily scare away potential customers. It was better to open up the market at a suitable price and make a small profit first before making a big one. However, what made Mo Xiaoxin the happiest was that his plan could finally be implemented. It was time to move the treasure. On the 4th day after the first batch of Soul Prayer wine was sold, the second batch of Soul Prayer wine was freshly brewed after another failure. This time, after discussing with Chu Zhe, Mo Xiaoxin took 2 bottles by himself with the reason that he wanted to try the taste. Chu Zhe naturally had no objection to this. From Chu Zue's point of view, he was only providing technical support. In reality, it was Mo Xiaoxin who had been busy all the time. Mo Xiaoxin had put in more effort than him. After getting the Soul Prayer wine, Mo Xiaoxin could no longer hold back his urge to go treasure hunting. He often saw players live streaming on the forum of treasure hunting in unknown areas or ruins and receiving very generous rewards. It would be a lie to say that he was not envious. However, it was his first time trying it himself, and he was full of anticipation. That day, he sailed to the sea in the brick-moving boat that he had kept for 3 years, heading to the area marked on the map. During the 2-day voyage, Mo Xiaoxin was on the forum the whole time. He also criticized the high price of the resurrection coin on the forum. The reason was, doesn't the trash seller have a conscience for selling it at such a high price? Naturally, this was Mo Xiaoxin's cover for himself. Although the possibility of being discovered was very low, he felt that it was better to have a layer of insurance. This was also the reason why he had been able to live well despite the fact that he had been unrestrained for the past 3 years. He had eliminated all possible unfavorable factors, even if the degree of danger was very small. As for whether his conscience would hurt if the price was too high, Mo Xiaoxin answered without hesitation. Not only did he not feel pain, but he was also very lively and happy. Although he had always understood that there was a huge difference in terms of earning money between a technical player and a brick-moving player. For example, a day of hard work for a pharmacist player might require a week or even a month of hard work for a brick-moving player. Back then, he had also used the mentality of a brick-moving player on the forum to complain about the high prices of the items sold by the technical players. But after joining in, Mo Xiaoxin only wanted to say, how fragrant. At this stage of the game, the most popular ways to earn money were recognized by the players as looting, trade, various life occupations, brick moving. However, there were many other ways to earn soul coins. There were also various ways to earn soul coins, such as exploring, treasure hunting, breeding, and so on. However, among the most popular ways to earn soul coins, players who fished, chopped trees, mined, and carried corpses were always at the bottom of the list. Not only did they have to work the hardest, but they also earned the least. Mo Xiaoxin had a deep understanding of this point. He always felt that the technical bastards made money too quickly and did not understand the feelings of the brick-moving players at all. However, at this moment, Mo Xiaoxin's position had changed from being a brick-moving player at the bottom to a player who earned money through technical skills. The weak brick-moving players had no one to blame but themselves. The fragrant law was one of the fundamental laws of the universe, and no one could escape it. Although every brick-moving player cursed and said that the technical players were black-hearted, in fact, They all wanted to join in and become a part of it. It was the same for Mo Xiaoxin. After being poor for 3 years, the fantasy of getting rich quickly had always been there. Moreover, he was sure that when Intoxicated Song became proficient in brewing soul wine, the cost would be reduced, and their income would not be any less than the players who engaged in looting and trading. If it reached a certain scale, it would definitely be one of the most profitable ways at this stage. Although there were too many investors in brewing soul wine, and he could only get about 10% of the income in the end, Mo Xiaoxin was very satisfied. He felt that he had finally made it. At this moment, holding the fishing rod, Mo Xiaoxin's face was filled with joy, and his heart was fantasizing about a beautiful future. Along the way, Mo Xiaoxin arrived at the location marked on the map, which was the junction between the Void Ocean and the Quelong Ocean. After opening the map and confirming the coordinates, Mo Xiaoxin put away the fishing rod and dived deep into the water. After storing the Spectre ship into the storage space, he began to dive to the bottom of the sea. As he dived, the water pressure kept increasing, and the light became dimmer and dimmer until his vision was completely covered by darkness. However, with the small map on the upper right corner, Mo Xiaoxin was not worried about finding the wrong direction. However, when he dived deeper, the water pressure became extremely high, and undercurrent whirlpools began to appear around him. Mo Xiaoxin could not take it anymore. Therefore, he decisively activated the ability brought about by the negative form, voidification. At this moment, gray mist gradually appeared on the surface of his body until his body completely atomized. Such a harsh underwater environment was originally unbearable for Mo Xiaoxin. But after activating voidification, the tearing force brought by the surrounding water pressure and whirlpools instantly dissipated, and he could continue diving without any hindrance. After diving for another kilometer or so, Mo Xiaoxin stopped diving and turned his head to look to his left. Although his vision was pitch black, the coordinates shown on the map were right there. Without hesitation, he dashed to the left. After advancing for about 10 meters, his surroundings suddenly became bright. He had once again arrived at the area where he obtained the soul praying wine's blueprint. It was still very quiet here. Apart from the two rusty dragon head pillars stuck in the middle, there was nothing else. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin deactivated voidification and strode to the dragon head pillars. Although he had found out from the information that the soul-praying wine might be the key to opening the dragon head pillars, he had no idea how to use it. After circling around the two dragon head pillars and observing them carefully, Mo Xiaoxin took out a bottle of soul-praying wine and sprinkled some on the pillars tentatively. When the wine came into contact with the dragon head pillars, the rusty pillars suddenly began to emit a black light, and the copper rust fell off. Seeing this, Mo Xiaoxin was pleasantly surprised, knowing that his method was correct. However, this process only lasted for a short while before it ended again. The black light emitted by the dragon head pillars converged and disappeared. Seeing this, Mo Xiaoxin immediately sprinkled some more wine on the dragon head pillars. As expected, the effect appeared again. As the rust fell off, the lines on the dragon head pillars became clearer. These lines seemed to be made up of paintings. However, because the pictures were too distorted, Mo Xiaoxin could not understand them and was too lazy to do so. He was here to dig for treasures, not to do archaeology. He had no intention of understanding the life story of the tomb owner. The only thing he understood was that the tomb owner who was buried in this way must have been very rich when he was alive. As he waited, the dragon head pillar was completely awakened, and the black light it emitted did not fade. Seeing this scene, Mo Xiaoxin smiled and immediately sprinkled the remaining wine in the bottle on the other dragon head pillar. Although he saw the effect, Mo Xiaoxin felt his heart ache when he sprinkled the wine. What he sprinkled was not wine, but soul coins. Sprinkling soul coins like this was burning money. How King extravagant. Soon, the first bottle of soul prayer wine was used up. Fortunately, he brought 2 bottles with him this time. If there was only 1 bottle, it would not be enough. At that time, Mo Xiaoxin also considered this point and chose to bring 2 bottles with him. The moment the 2 dragon head pillars were completely awakened, the space began to tremble. A faint dragon roar came from underground, and then the 2 dragon head pillars retracted into the ground. A formation appeared under Mo Xiaoxin's feet, and the energy nodes on it lit up one by one. Finally, they converged at the center and formed a portal. Above the portal, 2 black dragon heads stood on the left and right, and the energy they spat from their mouths converged to form a spatial passage in the center. Impressive! Mo Xiaoxin could not help but praise. At this moment, he could see the ingenuity of the tomb's design. Obviously, if he had been hot-headed back then and chose to dig 3 feet into the ground to open the tomb, he probably wouldn't have been able to find the exact location of the tomb until the day the expedition closed down. The moment he saw the portal, Mo Xiaoxin understood that the exact location of the tomb was not under his feet, but somewhere else. If he did not pass through the 2 dragon head pillars, he would not be able to open the tomb by force. Although it took more than a month, Mo Xiaoxin knew that his efforts had finally paid off. Treasure, here I come, it's all mine. Mo Xiaoxin could only use one word to describe the feeling of enjoying the treasure alone. Awesome. However, he did not enter directly. Instead, he drank the rest of the soul prayer wine in his hand to prevent any accidents from happening inside. After all, you would have to return to Beiki after he died, and it would take him a few days to come here again. It was too much of a waste of time. The wine was tasteless when it entered his throat, but the pores all over his body relaxed, making Mo Xiaoxin feel comfortable all over. At this moment, the game notification rang. Frowny face game notification. After drinking the soul prayer wine, you will have 2 chances to resurrect on the spot after death, 38 days. With 2 chances to resurrect, Mo Xiaoxin was more confident. With a smile on his face, he strode forward, ready to enjoy the treasure alone. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin suddenly noticed a few figures appearing on the upper right corner. What the F***? There really is one. Tong Gua did not lie to us. Awesome. I, Shueli, am here to dig the treasure. Woo! Happy! The brothers who were killed by the whirlpool on the way did not die in vain. Unfortunately, they will not be able to see the treasure. Mo Xiaoxin was stunned when he saw the familiar figures of Guyu, Sun Qi, Chun Ziyu, and others. He turned to look at the portal, and then at Guyu and the others. His face was filled with question marks. They said that they would enjoy the treasure alone. However, the situation seemed to have changed in some unknown way. Also, how did they know that there was a tomb here? At this moment, the smile on Mo Xiaoxin's face gradually disappeared. Chapter 6:29. At first, they thought that they had encountered the final boss of the stage, but after analyzing it, they realized that it was actually a player. Perhaps they could really obtain the treasures left behind by a certain force. The 2 of them could not accept the fact that they had gotten used to the comfortable life over the past few days. Guyu still chose to refuse, and the impatient Tong Gua continued to lower the price. Looking at Mo Xiaoxin, who was standing in front of the portal, Guyu thought for a while and decided to greet him, as well as ask him why he was here. They were very familiar with the people who came this time. After some inference, the Sea King felt that he had found the truth, and Guyu and the others who were standing not far away were the evidence. After that, they carefully searched the seabed at the border of the sea according to the location marked on the treasure map, and finally found this mysterious space. Tong Gua, who had received the money, gave Guyu a hint before leaving. The Sea King was very curious at that time, so he carefully studied the map under the moonlight. A few days ago, Guyu was still happy about it, thinking that investing in the soul-praying wine game was profitable and that there would be a steady stream of high returns in the future. Mushi only heard from Mo Xiaoxin that he found the map at the border of the Void Ocean and the Kuelong Ocean. As for the specific location, Mushi was not sure, but she still told Tong Gua what she knew. Silik, long time no see. However, before coming, he brought a few of his subordinates with him for safety reasons. Acquaintances. Before coming in, the Sea King was filled with joy, thinking that there might really be some wealth hidden in this space since it was hidden so deeply. Guyu was naturally tempted by the possibility of an underwater treasure or even a place where inheritance might exist, so he chose to discuss with Tong Gua the price to buy it. Therefore, the person who specially made the treasure map was definitely the player clan. The player clan. It was a treasure, so it was fun to give a general direction and search for it yourself. The players obviously did not understand the Sea King's answer, and they did not even understand why the Sea King said so. Only the player clan, who had nothing better to do, would spend a lot of energy on something so boring. I can't understand this Mother * King double is what kind of situation. As a very motivated person, the Sea King naturally would not miss such a rare opportunity, so he immediately prepared to take action. As expected, Tong Gua chose to reduce the price to 10,000 soul coins. Just 2 days ago, his subordinates had sent him a tattered parchment drawing, saying that it had been dug out from a mine on a resource island under their control and that it was very deep underground. So he immediately said that he would sell it for 20,000 soul coins. For example, Guyu, Lu Chai, and the others, this was especially so for the Sea King. When he saw Guyu and the others, his first thought was, moreover, the depths of the sea were quiet and dark. Although they had prepared searchlights, there would always be a sense of strangeness and loneliness in this place, as if they were isolated from the world. Although Guyu was rich, he was not stupid. How could he spend a lot of money to buy this kind of information that could not be verified? He decisively chose to reject the offer. At this moment, Guyu and the others were just like Mo Xiaoxin, their faces full of questions. At this moment, the Sea King was very sad. Guyu and the others had suffered a lot during these 4 days of searching under the sea. The place where the soul prayer wine was placed was most likely the location of the Great Tomb. However, after the joy, they suddenly noticed that there was a person standing in the center of this space. Although Tong Gua was very unreliable, Guyu still listened to him. In the end, he chose to cooperate with Lu Chai and the others to search for the possible existence of this huge tomb. I beg of you, be human in the future. For this reason, Tong Gua specially looked for Mu Shi and asked about the location of the treasure. In fact, Guyu and the others had arrived about 4 days earlier than Mo Xiaoxin. As for the 3,000 soul coins, even if it was a loss, Guyu would accept it. After greeting them, Guyu was about to ask the Sea King why he was here. Guyu and the others were confused. Even Eldering would not have thought that his meticulous plan would eventually go out of control because of Mo Xiaoxin's appearance. The reason was very simple. In this world of cruel survival laws, no one would be so bored as to spend a lot of time making a useless map to deceive the future generations. After all, everyone was so busy. As a result, on that night, the Sea King accidentally discovered that when the moonlight shone on the parchment through the room window, the blurry picture on the parchment became clear and a light green glowing trail appeared. Apart from the threat of the sea beasts, the undercurrent whirlpool at the bottom of the sea was also extremely terrifying. If one was accidentally pulled into it, they would be torn into pieces. Coupled with the huge water pressure, it was very difficult for them to escape. From the first discovery of the Soul Prayer wine brewing recipe until now, the plot had completely deviated from the main plot and taken off. However, in Tong Gua's opinion, this was enough. Since they did not have Mo Xiaoxin's precise positioning, they had been searching for this underwater tomb for the past 4 days. During this period, more than half of the hundreds of guild elites that they brought along had died, and now there were only about 20 people left. Looking at Guyu and the others, the Sea King's expression gradually changed, and he looked extremely angry. At this moment, the 3 parties looked at each other, feeling very confused. Fortunately, they could communicate with each other through the voice channel. Otherwise, they would not have been able to persist. After the 3 parties stared at each other for a while, Guyu, who was extremely confused, broke the silence and looked at the Sea King. Guyu. At this moment, Guyu realized that this was the initiator of the Soul Prayer wine brewing plan. On the back of this coordinate map, there was a detailed record of a strange formula in small, densely packed words. Just 7 days ago. Moreover, He knew a few of these people. The atmosphere suddenly became very strange. At that time, the Sea King carefully examined this tattered parchment and found that there was nothing special except for a blurry picture on it. Therefore, he did not think much of it and threw it aside. He did not expect to meet the initiator of the Soul Prayer wine brewing plan here. When they saw who it was, they could not help but be dumbfounded. Mother Kerr, you players have nothing to do all day long. But I'm King busy. Based on his understanding of the player clan, they would really do something like this. CKU, the player clan. It was the Sea King, whom they called the Sea Leak, and a few lords under him. The duo of Tongwa and Yen Mai, who spent their days eating and drinking, was finally driven out of the clan by the Wood Spirit clan leader, Mu Shi. However, at this moment, the Sea King's face turned pale, and then he said with a bitter expression, the Sea King was curious and felt that this matter was not simple. He was afraid that he had been fooled. Before coming here, the Sea King felt that the location pointed to by the coordinate map was very likely to contain treasures. After that, the two of them had no one to rely on. Therefore, Tongwa took this news to Gu Yu and expressed that he wanted to make a big deal with him. Damn it, how did they find this place? However, now that he thought about it, the Sea King felt that he had missed a force. Both sides looked at each other. At this moment, they were both confused and could not understand why there were other players in this space. As long as they were happy. However, as soon as he took a step, the space suddenly shook slightly. Mo Xiaoxin. After all, this sheepskin scroll was buried deep in the ground and was only recently dug out. He could not think of any reason for the player clan to be here. After all, it was too much of a coincidence. In fact, their efforts were not in vain. The moment they entered the underwater space, Gu Yu and the others felt that the 4 days of hard work had been worth it. As for the formula recorded on the back of this treasure map, the Sea King did not know for now. However, he planned to explore the spot according to the coordinates on the treasure map before deciding what to do next. Are you guys really that bored? The Sea King. However, after entering this space, the Sea King was completely dumbfounded when he saw the player clan standing not far away. Anyway, it's not like I'm the one looking for it. It doesn't matter if it's a little troublesome. The bored player clan is stirring up trouble again. When he told the Wood Spirit clan that the soul-praying wine could only be used on souls, he had a speculation. In his opinion, there was only one truth to everything. Although he could not be sure, Tongwa still wanted to try to fool a few fools and earn some soul coins first. As for whether he could find it or not, he did not care. In the end, Gu Yu bought the information about the underwater tomb from Tongwa at the price of 3,000 soul coins. Mo Xiaoxin, Gu Yu, and the others were surprised and immediately turned to look. In fact, Gu Yu had grasped Tongwa's thoughts. Tongwa naturally knew that Gu Yu was very rich. After all, Gu Yu often spent a lot of money to customize exclusive weapons. He was one of the richest players he had ever seen. Then, several figures broke through the underwater space barrier and appeared in this space. And it even came to his head. It's best to bring more people with you. The owner of the underwater tomb with a dragon head pillar must have been a super powerhouse when he was alive. With your strength, you may not be able to handle it. He guessed that this might be a treasure map left by a certain force for their descendants. This was because one of the labels in his eyes was. Finally, he was shocked to find that this was a coordinate map, and the location of the coordinates was near the Kuelong Ocean. Mo Xiaoxin. At this moment, Tongwa thought of selling the treasure. At this moment, there was only one thought in the Sea King's mind. Chapter 630. At this moment, in the space deep under the sea, the stalemate between the Sea King and Gu Yu and the others finally ended after a while. At this moment, everyone had different thoughts. From Gu Yu's point of view, there was only one reason for everyone to gather here. Tongwa must have sold the news of the treasure to many people. From the Sea King's point of view, the players must have been bored out of their minds and messed with him. Among them, Mo Xiaoxin was the most confused. Before the arrival of Gu Yu and the Sea King, he had always thought that this secret belonged to him and that he should be the only one who could enjoy the treasure. However, at this moment, he had an illusion that what he thought was a secret was actually something that everyone knew The sorrow in his heart could not be described with words. In the end, they still sat down and began to discuss the reason. In the forum, when Mo Xiaoxin learned that Guyu came because he bought the news of Tonghua, he immediately understood the reason. The news came from him. At this moment, he was filled with regret. In the end, it was all because he had sold the Soul Prayer wine brewing diagram to the Wood Spirit race, which had led to everything that had happened afterwards. As he listened to their conversation, the Sea King, who was initially pale, gradually realized something. This time, the players were not messing with him on purpose. There was really a treasure here. By the way, Sea Leek, it's time for you to leave. During the conversation, Guyu suddenly turned his head and looked at the Sea King. What do you mean by leaving? I'm not leaving, the Sea King said with a guilty look. At the beginning of the argument, he was angry and scolding, but after knowing that there was really a treasure here, it smells good. As for leaving, that was impossible. Everyone who saw it had a share. Shameless. Looking at the Sea King, the dog could not help but shake his head and sigh. I still remember the first time I saw you was at the seaside. You were so domineering when you threatened Chana. Look at you now. TSK, TSK. Seaside? Threatened Chana? The Sea King was stunned. After thinking for a while, he remembered that he did collect protection fees from Chana. At that time, in order to force Chana, he led a large number of Sea Clan warriors to the Lioli coast and beat Chana until he vomited blood. However, the Sea King remembered that the player clan had not yet appeared at that time. How did they see it? Although he was confused, the Sea King did not ask. Instead, he said solemnly, "Then let's discuss the distribution before we enter the underground tomb." Distribute your head. Didn't you say you were busy just now? Time to go back. Lu Chai could not help but roll his eyes. That's not right. Since I've obtained the coordinates at this time, it means that it's fate. Therefore, I must go. How about this? We'll split it 50-50, as usual. The Sea King said with a serious expression. Upon hearing this, Sun Chi Zi turned to look at the number of people behind him, then at the people behind the Sea King. Why don't we make it more democratic and vote? Even if you want to vote, you're not a player. Pets don't count. The Sea King looked at Sun Chi in disdain. Dog, Go Zi couldn't help but grit his teeth. He really wanted to pounce over and bite this disobedient sheep to death. At this moment, Guyu spoke. Sea King, it's us players who will be opening the tomb this time. It's fine if you want to join us, but it won't be a 50-50 split like last time. Also, there's a condition. If we encounter any danger inside, you must contribute. When the Sea King heard this, he hesitated. In fact, he knew that he couldn't take the initiative in this negotiation like last time. More importantly, he didn't want to offend the player clan. It was already good enough that he got anything. Thinking of this, the Sea King nodded. Sure, but it's better to clarify how we should split it before we go in. When Gozi heard that, he raised his paw and said, Why don't we split it according to the number of people? You have 5 people on your side, and we have 21 people on our side. Let's split it into 26 portions. When the Sea King heard this, he glared at the dog, but did not say anything else. Seeing that the Sea King seemed to have acquiesced, Sun Chi suddenly turned to look at Mo Xiaoxin, who had been silent all this while. What do you think? Hearing this, Mo Xiaoxin squeezed out a smile. I'm fine with anything. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin really wanted to press the dog who had suggested this onto the ground. What do you mean by the number of people? I've spent a lot of time looking up information, accompanying Chu Zue to brew the Soul Prayer wine, and after that, I've studied the array by myself. I'm so King exhausted. I'm so close to success, and now you're telling me to split it according to the number of people. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin really wanted to smash the dog's head with his staff. However, he did not dare to say anything presumptuous. This was not the forum. His character in the game was a humble and easygoing person. He could not afford to expose the truth. This was so unfair. Was this the retribution for dissing the dog in the forum for 3 years? Looking at the smiling Mo Xiaoxin, Sun Chi was stunned. He felt that the smile was so fake. As if realizing something, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned to look at Guyu and said, Boss, he was the first to arrive. Actually, the opportunity should belong to him. Why don't we just split it into 30 portions and let him take 5? When Guyu heard this, he nodded. Let's do as you said. 30 portions. What do you think, Sea King? I think it's unfair if we take too little, the Sea King said angrily. Then hold it in. Yi Shui looked at the Sea King and said. The Sea King was speechless. After that, there was another round of discussion. Guyu, Lu Chai, and the others obviously considered Mo Xiaoxin's feelings and said that he should take 5 portions. In fact, Mo Xiaoxin was now a treasure in the eyes of Guyu and the others. All the major guilds present had invested in Mo Xiaoxin before, so to them, Mo Xiaoxin was considered one of them. Whether the resurrection coins could sell well in the future depended on him. Only the Sea King felt that it was obviously too little for him to take 5 portions. He had to increase the price. However, the players completely ignored the Sea King's protest. At this moment, the Sea King was so angry that he was glaring. No matter what, I'm still a powerhouse of the Ghost Emperor realm. Can you beat me? How dare you not show me any respect? If the people present were not from the player clan, but from other forces, the Sea King would definitely not say anything and kill them all. I want them all. However, facing the player clan, he was only angry. As for fighting, he would never consider it. After all, he really could not afford to offend the player clan. As for Mo Xiaoxin, he finally felt better after knowing that he would take 5 portions. If they were to split it according to the number of people, he felt that he might faint on the spot. After all, it was more than a month of hard work. After the discussion, everyone stood up and walked toward the teleportation point. When Guyu was about to walk into the teleportation point, the Sea King stopped him with a vigilant look. Don't rush. Check it first to prevent any problems with the teleportation point. What's there to be afraid of? We've worked so hard for 4 days. Even if there's a problem, we still have to go in. Lu Chai glanced at the Sea King and walked into the teleportation point while cursing. After that, Guyu and the others followed him into the teleportation point. The Sea King was speechless. The player clan has always been so unrestrained when it comes to not caring about their lives. I can't learn it. The Sea King could not help but lament. However, he would not be so unrestrained. He decisively led his 4 subordinates to carefully check the teleportation point to see if there were any hidden dangers. After a round of trouble, he walked into the teleportation point with a vigilant look. The moment he entered the teleportation passage, the Sea King felt a huge suction coming from the front. He immediately activated the death energy in his body and formed a layer of protection on the surface of his body to prevent any possible danger. After about 10 seconds, the suction began to weaken and the view in front of him suddenly widened. It was a cave full of purple fluorescent flowers. At this moment, Lu Chai and the others were standing not far away, looking at him with a look of disgust. Stop dawdling. You guys are the only ones left. Why are you looking for treasures if you're afraid of death? The Sea King was speechless. Only the player clan. If it were other forces, I'll kill their whole family. With the arrival of the Sea King, everyone began to walk forward under Lu Chai's lead. As they walked, the purple fluorescent flowers began to sway. Purple fluorescent pollen suddenly filled the entire cave, even blocking their vision. This purple fluorescent powder seemed to have the ability to soothe emotions. Everyone felt a sense of tranquility in their hearts. Why do I have the urge to lie in the flowers and pass away peacefully? At this moment, Sun Chi suddenly spoke and broke the silence. Me too, Shueli said faintly. Upon hearing this, Lu Chai, who was the leader, looked at the purple flowers and opened the analysis. Requiem flower, special. Spiritual material details. A special flower that grows in the Central Sea area of the Netherworld, close to the 6 realms of reincarnation. It is also known as the reincarnation flower. Seeing this flower means that one is about to step into the 6 realms of reincarnation. It will also be transplanted into the tomb to accompany the souls of the deceased and guide them into the 6 realms of reincarnation. Spiritual material effect. Tranquilize, slightly hypnotize. Just as Lu Chai thought, the problem was with these flowers. Fortunately, it was only a weak hypnotic effect, so he did not need to worry about it. He turned around and found that the Sea King and the others had already activated their body surface protection and were vigilant. "What are you looking at? You guys are not afraid of death, but I am." The Sea King glared at Lu Chai. Lu Chai did not answer. Instead, he looked at Gu Yu and the others behind him and said, "Continue forward. This flower is not poisonous and harmless." "How do you know it's not poisonous?" The Sea King could not help but ask curiously. "I guessed it, believe it or not." Upon hearing Lu Chai's answer, the Sea King really felt that this group of fools from the player clan was joking with their lives. "I can't learn it. I can't learn it." As they walked along the intersection, the Sea King was extremely vigilant. On the other hand, the players were the exact opposite. They felt tranquil in the pollen and even had the thought of lying down and dying peacefully on the spot. As they walked, the dog could not take it anymore because he always wanted to lie down. As a white phantom who was close to nature, the hypnotic effect of the requiem flower on him was much stronger than that of Lu Chai and the others. After thinking for a while, he opened the forum panel and clicked on an explosive piece of music to play in the live chat channel. At this moment, even the crowd was instantly energized. What a talent! Shueli, who was also sleepy, could not help but give the dog thumbs up. Upon hearing this, the dog returned a proud look, Omega, and his head began to shake along with the rhythm of the music. Mo Xiaoxin was speechless. Silly dog. However, he kept these two words in his heart and did not dare to say it out loud. What's wrong with this silly dog? Is he poisoned? The Sea King, who did not know about the existence of the live chat channel, noticed that the dog's head had suddenly begun to shake. He thought that there was something wrong with the surrounding plants and asked in surprise. Upon hearing this, Mo Xiaoxin silently gave the Sea King a thumbs up in his heart. This was because he had said what he wanted to say. Chapter 631. Sun Chi, who was swaying to the rhythm of the music to refresh himself, heard the Sea King's words. His face turned ashen and his body stopped shaking. He turned around and glared fiercely at the Sea King, assuming a posture as if he was about to pounce on him. Lu Chai and the others could not help but laugh out loud. After the interlude, everyone continued to walk along the passageway outside. With the help of Sun Chi, Lu Chai and the others no longer felt sleepy. After walking along the passageway for about half an hour, the path in front of them suddenly widened. When they completely walked out of the cave, a huge open space appeared in front of them. Lu Chai and the others were shocked when they saw the scene in front of them. As far as the eye could see, there were countless terracotta soldiers in black armor standing not far away. They were so densely packed that they could not even see the end of them. At the center of these terracotta soldiers, a huge black crystal coffin floated in the air. Several blue energy belts hung down from it, forming an energy ball that supported the bottom of the coffin, gently swaying the crystal coffin. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. Even the experienced and knowledgeable Sea King was speechless. In fact, when he passed through the teleportation passage, he already felt that the owner of the tomb was not simple. However, when he saw the terracotta soldiers and the crystal coffin, he felt that he had underestimated the identity of the owner of the tomb. "It would be great if I could be this awesome after I die," Sun Chi said with a face full of envy. Everyone was speechless. "Sea Chives, can you tell whose tomb this is?" Gu Yu turned around and asked the Sea King. The Sea King rolled his eyes when he heard that. "How would I know? There was no such person when I was born. Maybe it's some big boss from ancient times. You only know how to fight and kill. See, now you're at a disadvantage because you don't study history." Sun Chi looked at the Sea King with disdain and said, "Silly dog, do you really think that I don't dare to beat you up?" Mo Xiaoxin was very envious of the Sea King, who was talking back to Sun Chi. In comparison, he could only hide in the dark and talk back. "Everyone, look, there seems to be some words here." Shueli's voice came from the front. Everyone heard her and immediately turned around to see Shueli standing in front of the stone pillar in front of the terracotta soldiers, reading the words on it. Upon seeing this, everyone hurried forward and surrounded the 5-meter-wide stone pillar to examine it. "Shadow Killer, I will protect you when you are alive and protect you when you are dead." The Shadow Army will not enter the 6 paths of reincarnation and will accompany you for all eternity. After the artifact reacted to this line of words, Shui Li murmured it out. You recognize these words? The Sea King was astonished because he had never seen these words before. See, you've suffered once again because of your lack of culture. Didn't you say that you would learn history well? Gozi took the opportunity to attack. He hated the Sea King, who had been calling him a stupid dog all this time. He decisively seized the opportunity to mentally attack him. The Sea King, at that moment, he really wanted to smash Gozi's head. He really didn't know his place. After that, Shui Li began to walk around the pillar excitedly and read the words on it bit by bit. Seeing this, everyone stood aside and listened to Shui Li's explanation. As players, they naturally did not have the same sense of urgency as the Sea King. In the eyes of the crowd, they were playing a game after all. It was good to understand the background of the game. They could also show off in the forum in the future. Through Shui Li's narration, everyone gradually learned the identity of the tomb owner and his story. The story recorded every important point in the tomb owner's growth, as if the person who carved these words had witnessed everything with his own eyes. 2 hours passed quickly. When Shui Li finished reading the last word on the stone pillar, everyone was stunned. The story of the tomb owner shocked them to the core. Born in a merchant family, he built a dynasty that spanned across many seas with his own ability. This was a height that many powerhouses dreamed of, but could never reach. If that was the case, the players would not be so shocked. More importantly, the tomb owner had the idea of going against the Underworld Chamber of Commerce since he was young and put it into action. In the eyes of the players, this was too crazy. It was like a firefly trying to compete with the bright moon. It was foolish and ignorant. However, the shadow grew to the point where it threatened the position of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce. In the story engraved on the stone pillar, apart from the tomb owner, there was also an army that followed the tomb owner like a shadow. The Shadow Army. After reaching a certain level of strength, the first step the tomb owner took was to build a shadow army. This army was made up of elites. The soldiers were personally selected by the tomb owner and trained since young. They were loyal to him. Even though many of these soldiers grew stronger than the tomb owner, they never crossed the line and never had the idea of rebelling. The players might not have thought much of it, but the Sea King, who was standing at the side, was shocked. Was it the loyalty of the soldiers? Perhaps, but to the Sea King, the tomb owner himself was more important. He used to be the overlord of the Void Ocean and was now the monarch of the Mutesi nation. Hence, he understood the difficulties of being the overlord of the sea. The Sea King felt that he was good at controlling his subordinates. However, even he could not guarantee that his subordinates would not betray him when their strength surpassed his. However, this emperor called the Shadow had many subordinates in the army that were stronger than him. However, they were still loyal and never betrayed him. This was terrifying to the Sea King. Thinking of this, the Sea King turned to look at the terracotta soldiers in black armor in front of him. Then, he looked at the first sentence on the stone pillar. Shadow Killer. Protect you when you are alive, and protect you when you are dead. The Shadow Army will not enter the 6 realms of reincarnation and will accompany you forever. Although he could not understand these words, the Sea King seemed to see countless figures bathed in blood fighting for their master. Finally, the Sea King's gaze shifted to the blue crystal coffin, and his face was filled with envy. He suddenly felt that Gozi's words were right. If he could have this achievement after death, it would be worth it. It would be the pinnacle of life. At the end of the story, the Shadow Dynasty was destroyed. The Shadow Army that was once extremely powerful and had several god-level powerhouses was also destroyed. Their bodies melted in the annihilation formation set up by the top powerhouses of the Acheron Chamber of Commerce until only their skeletons were left. The entire army was annihilated. Only one person survived, and he was also a member of the Shadow Army. Even though his body melted and only his bones were left, he still pieced together the bodies of his former comrades and the tomb owner from the ruins. He spent an unimaginable amount of time and finally built the royal tomb that belonged to the Shadow Dynasty. This kind of perseverance moved the players and the Sea King. At this moment, what no one noticed was that Mo Xiaoxin's expression had changed subtly. In this story, everyone was paying attention to the tomb owner and the shadow army, but they did not notice a detail. However, he did. When the person who survived built these terracotta soldiers, he used an item, the soul praying solution, which was also known as the soul praying wine. Mo Xiaoxin was well aware of the effect of this item. It could nourish the soul so that the souls of the dead would not enter the six realms. Thinking of this, he turned to look at the densely packed terracotta soldiers in front of him and broke out in a cold sweat. With so many terracotta soldiers, how much soul-praying wine would be used? He could not imagine how long the person who survived used to brew enough soul-praying wine. However, he was sure that even if Chu Zue could live for another 100 years, he would not be able to brew this amount. More importantly, if the soul-praying wine was used, the souls of the soldiers of the Shadow Army would be locked in these armors. Wouldn't that mean that they were still alive? Thinking of this, Mo Xiaoxin was shocked. What's wrong with you? You don't look too good. Sun Qi looked at Mo Xiaoxin and asked, I'm fine. Mo Xiaoxin immediately replied. Although he said he was fine, he was panicking inside. If his guess was correct, the souls of the dead soldiers of the Shadow Army were still left in these armors. If they were to rise in revolt, they would probably die here. Hey, the material of these armors is not bad. Should we bring a few back? At this moment, a voice interrupted Mo Xiaoxin's thoughts. He turned his head to look. Then, he was horrified to find Xue Li patting the armor of a mercenary with a smile on her face. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin wanted to scream. Looking at the mercenary, Mo Xiaoxin prayed in his heart. Please don't be awakened. Please don't be awakened. As the saying goes, what you fear will come. In the end, you can't escape. The head of the mercenary that Xue Li touched suddenly lit up with soul fire. Then, the heads of the surrounding mercenaries also lit up. In a short period of time, like a spark spreading, it quickly spread throughout the royal tomb. Seeing this scene, the rest of the people were also shocked and did not understand what was happening. Meanwhile, the Sea King was so scared that his face turned green. Just now, he felt countless soul waves. In other words, there were souls in these armors. After listening to Xue Li's story about the tomb owner, he clearly knew how terrifying the strength of these soldiers guarding the tomb was. After all, the Shadow Army was the main force against the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. How could they be weak? At this moment, the Sea King only had one thought in his mind. I'm afraid I'm going to die here. At this moment, he was extremely regretful. Who gave me the guts to cooperate with the player clan and enter the tomb of the powerhouses? Didn't they know how arrogant they were? Now I'm dead. Thinking of this, the Sea King turned his head to look at Xue Li, his eyes full of resentment. What cheap hand. Now we're all dead together. Seeing the Sea King's resentful gaze, Xue Li rubbed her head awkwardly, knowing that she had made a mistake. Mo Xiaoxin, who knew the truth about the Terracotta Army, also cast a pitying gaze at the Sea King. Sea Leek, it's okay if we die, but you have to hold on. Chapter 632. After Xue Li touched the terracotta soldier, the souls of all the soldiers of the Shadow Legion in the tomb were awakened. Looking at the countless dancing soul fires in front of them, the players were dumbfounded. The Sea King was even more frightened. He had been vigilant ever since he entered the tomb, just to avoid touching the taboo in the tomb. However, no matter how careful he was, he missed the existence of the players. Although it was a treasure hunt, the players were not burdened at all. They were just sightseeing. That was why something happened. The Sea King's face turned pale as he felt the strong soul power waves spreading in front of him. I'm afraid I'm finished. At this moment, the terracotta soldier standing at the front suddenly raised its hand and grabbed Xue Li, who was standing in front of it. Xue Li immediately noticed the terracotta soldier's abnormality, but it was too late to dodge. Just when Xue Li thought he had to return to Beiki, a figure appeared in front of him and blocked the attack for him. Xue Li was stunned. He looked up and realized that the person who blocked the terracotta soldier's attack was the Sea King. Run! The Sea King roared with his face flushed. As he spoke, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and loosened his grip. The terracotta soldier's right arm slammed into his chest and sent him flying. At this moment, the Sea King was extremely terrified. He had just realized that the terracotta soldier was attacking Shui Li. He wanted to save Shui Li and test the terracotta soldier's strength. However, a terracotta soldier that did not have a complete body defeated him in one blow. After falling heavily on the ground, the Sea King spat out another mouthful of blood. The Sea King's heart sank as he felt the rampaging power in his body. He felt that his chances of escaping this place had decreased by 10%. Run! Don't just stand there like a fool. Looking at Gu Yu and the others who were still standing there, the Sea King roared. He immediately leaped up from the ground and dashed toward the cave where he came from. However, as soon as he finished speaking, all the terracotta soldiers in the tomb suddenly disappeared on the spot. When they reappeared, they were already in front of the cave. The Sea King was speechless. My condolences. Seeing this, the dog could not help but cover his face. In fact, when the terracotta soldier woke up, the dog and the others thought that they were going to die here. However, they did not panic at all. Although they were young, they had long since become indifferent to death. The only thing he was worried about was whether the sea chives could withstand it. When they saw the terracotta soldiers blocking the only way out, the players' hearts were as heavy as the Sea King's. Even their thoughts were the same. They all felt that it was over for them. Of course, he was not the one who was finished, but the sea chives that he had carefully cultivated for 3 years. Under everyone's vigilant gazes, the terracotta soldiers did not launch any further attacks. Instead, they stood quietly on the spot, as if trying to block their path. Sea chives, you're finished. At this moment, Gozi spoke in despair. You guys aren't finished either. The Sea King seemed to have given up on resisting. He turned around and roared at Sun Chi angrily. We can only close and open our eyes for 3 hours, but you can close them for the rest of your life. How can you compare? Sun Chi looked at the Ocean King with grief and indignation. The Sea King, any last words? I can help you deliver the message. Shui Li looked at the Sea King guiltily and said. Upon hearing this, the Sea King's face turned pale. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly turned his head to look at the coffin floating in the air. At this moment, the lid of the coffin moved slowly, and a cloud of blue mist floated out from within, condensing into the shape of a child in the air. Under everyone's astonished gaze, the child formed by the blue mist suddenly opened his eyes, and a mischievous smile appeared on his face. He rolled in the air, and then floated toward the Sea King and the others. The players were unfazed, but the Sea King took a step back vigilantly. If the terracotta soldiers were this strong, he did not believe that the thing that came out of the Tomb Master's coffin would be weak. At this moment, the little boy floated to the front of the crowd and looked at them with a smile. Tell us why you're here. We trespassed by accident, and we mean no harm, the Sea King quickly said, afraid that the players would say something impudent. The players immediately nodded, afraid that they would say something wrong and cause the sea chives to die on the spot. Trespassed by accident? The little blue boy looked doubtful, and then said, Are you sure about your words? We really trespassed by accident, and we didn't mean to, the Sea King quickly replied. That's a pity. You were supposed to have a chance to inherit the Shadow Legion, but since you trespassed by accident, then leave this place. As he spoke, the little blue boy waved his hand, and all the terracotta soldiers at the entrance of the cave disappeared, returning to their original positions. The Sea King, the players, the turn of events happened too quickly. From a life-and-death crisis to a sudden safety, the Sea King and the players were caught off guard. Wait, we're here for the inheritance. Just let the sea chives leave. Sun Chi suddenly stood up and said to the little blue boy with a serious expression, Yes. We didn't trespass by accident. Our purpose is clear, don't misunderstand. I didn't expect there to be an inheritance here. Looks like we came to the right place. The Sea King was dumbfounded as he looked at the group of players who were acting like drama queens. He subconsciously turned to look at the cave, then at the players, and finally at the little blue boy. I'm not leaving. The players, you all want the inheritance of the Shadow Legion? The little blue boy asked with a smile. Yes. Everyone said in unison. Okay, I agree, but you have to pass a test of mine first. Everyone pricked up their ears and looked at the little blue boy with a serious expression, waiting for the content of the test. The test is simple. Tell me, what's your dream? Hearing the little blue boy's question, everyone was dumbfounded. Let's start with you. Seeing that everyone was in a daze, the little blue boy pointed at Sun Chi, who was standing at the front. When Go Zi heard this, he smiled awkwardly. After thinking for a while, he said, when I was young, my dream was to be a scientist, but now my dream is to obtain a powerful inheritance, such as the Shadow Legion. Hearing what Sun Chi said, the live chat channel was flooded with the word shameless. Hearing that, the little blue boy smiled, pointed at Shueli, and said, "What about you?" Shueli, who was named, suddenly looked very solemn. Actually, my ability is quite similar to that of the Shadow Legion's warriors. My dream has always been to obtain an inheritance like the Shadow Legion. It's very compatible with me. At this moment, the live chat channel was flooded with shameless again. What about you? At this time, the little blue boy pointed at Yuan Fong, who had been silent in the team. Hearing that, Yuan Fong scratched his bald head and said, "My dream? Actually, I don't have a big dream. I just hope that Master will allow me to eat meat." Everyone, what about you? The little blue boy pointed at Guyu. Guyu smiled awkwardly. My dream now is to be invincible and no one can defeat me. This answer was actually Guyu's inner voice. With the demonic god's inheritance, he was not interested in other inheritances, so he told the truth. However, he hid another thought from the bottom of his heart: to build the first battle guild. What about you? What about you? What about you? After that, the players were called out one by one, and all of them expressed their dreams. However, most of the players' dreams were related to the Shadow Legion. Basically, they came up with these lines at the last minute, and all of them were eager to obtain the inheritance. After the players were called out, the little blue boy looked at the Sea King and Hei Sui and the others who were standing behind him. Seeing that, the Sea King opened his mouth but did not know what to say. In fact, when the players answered this question, he was already thinking about what his dream was. Dreams were things that would change with experience and growth. At the very beginning, his biggest dream was to inherit the Mu Taisi nation. However, this dream was shattered with the appearance of Mu Zhiguang. After that, his dream was to dominate the Void Ocean. He succeeded in this dream. However, after his success, he had a bigger dream. Rather than calling it a dream, it was more like an ambition. He wanted to build a superpower that spanned across many oceans. However, this dream was shattered with the appearance of the player clan. After that, there was only one thought that supported the Sea King to continue to become stronger, and that was to overthrow the player clan. However, after experiencing so many things, this thought had changed. It could be said that his dream was constantly changing with the things that he had experienced, and it was impossible to describe in detail. What's wrong? Don't you have a dream? At this time, the little blue boy asked curiously. The Sea King shook his head. My dream is always changing. I suddenly don't know how to describe it. Perhaps the general direction is to control my own life and have absolute freedom. The little blue boy listened and nodded. He turned to look at the Sea King's subordinates and continued to ask questions. After everyone present had expressed their dreams, the little blue boy smiled and waved his hand. A ball of liquid floated up from the crystal coffin in the distance and quickly floated toward the crowd. At this moment, the Sea King and the players realized that they could not move. At this time, the blue liquid came into contact with the surface of their bodies and seeped into their bodies. At this time, a game notification rang in the minds of all the players. Frowny face game notification. Absorbed soul-praying liquid, grade 82, obtained a maximum number of resurrections on the spot. 838 days. Unlike the players, the eyes of the Sea King and his subordinates suddenly became empty as if their souls had been sucked out. At this time, the little blue boy also noticed that something was wrong with the players, and the smile on his face froze. After staring at the players for a while, he reached out his hand again and summoned a ball of soul-praying liquid from the coffin. After dispersing it, it flowed into the players' bodies. Game notification. absorbed soul-praying liquid, grade 82, obtained the maximum number of resurrections on the spot. 838 days. The game notification rang again, and the players were dumbfounded. However, the little blue boy's current mood was the same as the players. At first, he wanted to use the unbearable characteristic of the soul-praying liquid to put the souls of everyone present on the verge of collapse. This would make it easier for him to search the soul's memories and choose the successor. However, it was obvious that the players did not fall for it. Under the protection of the artifact, the soul-praying liquid was stored in the players' bodies. It would only be released at the moment of the player's death to nourish their souls. This also led to the current awkward scene. The little blue boy's plan to search the soul's memories of everyone present could not be carried out normally. Chapter 633. The pain from their souls caused their muscles to convulse as if they were being pierced by countless needles. The unbearable pain filled their bodies and stimulated their nerves. Yes, but not now. Although the Shadow King's soul had entered the 6 paths of reincarnation, they had never thought of leaving, nor had they forgotten the hatred that they bore in their hearts. "There's something wrong with your souls," the little boy said with a serious face. The blue little boy pressed his palm on the Sea King's forehead and closed his eyes to explore the memory of his soul. He knew one thing after listening to Shui Li's story about the Shadow Dynasty. The Sea King frowned slightly when he heard it. When he asked everyone what their dreams were, the Sea King did not reveal all his thoughts without reservation. After waiting for about half an hour, the bloodshot eyes of the Sea King and the others finally stopped struggling. "Why?" The Sea King was stunned. He suddenly understood what Sha meant. However, at this moment, he knew that the opportunity had finally come. In fact, he had a dream in his heart, a huge ambition that he had yet to reveal. What the F***CK? The Sea King was dumbfounded when he heard this, and he blurted out a curse. Most of these sea overlords would be submerged in the river of time and would not be able to cause any trouble. They would only shine for a short while at a certain point in their own era. They were more like passers-by in an era, not the ones who pushed the waves forward. Although the Sea King had great achievements, there were too many sea overlords like the Sea King in the entire history of the Underworld Sea area. Those who were not qualified were sent out. Since they were still here, could it be that they were recognized? "Do you want to go in and ask again?" Shui looked at everyone helplessly. "Are you asking about the friends who came in with you? They are not qualified and have been sent out by me. But don't worry, I didn't do anything to them." Sha immediately explained. After about 10 minutes, the blue little boy retracted his hand with a surprised look on his face. He could not understand what the blue little boy meant. He had promised to give them the inheritance. Why did he chase them out? Well, let's wait. I'm also curious if the sea leaks can succeed. Lu Chai nodded in agreement. Therefore, if he brought the Shadow Legion out now, the Underworld Chamber of Commerce would definitely notice. Then, he would have to face the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's suppression and pursuit. When the blue boy heard this, a smile appeared on his face. Therefore, the little blue boy did not have any doubts about the person he had recommended and immediately chose to approve of him. In his opinion, although Shadow Master wasn't the strongest member of the Shadow Corps, he was definitely the most loyal person to the Shadow King. Does that mean I can mobilize all the soldiers here? From the Sea King's birth to the time when he became the overlord of the Void Ocean, he did not think much of it. Let me introduce myself. I'm Shadow Killer, the commander of the Shadow Corps. What did you do to us? The Sea King raised his head and asked in a hoarse voice. Hence, obtaining resurrection tokens was of little value to them. If it could really be exchanged for soul coins, then the crowd naturally wouldn't have any dissatisfaction. The corners of their mouths would be so wide that they would be grinning from ear to ear. Where did the player clan go? For this reason, they had been waiting for the day to see the light of day again. To the blue little boy, this idea was really King exciting. Decent. Moreover, he was the teacher of the Shadow King and the soul of the Shadow Army. At this moment, the Sea King, Shui, and the others who had regained their senses couldn't help but let out a scream. This was because most of the overlords would end up in a miserable state after falling from a high position. It was even rarer for them to make a comeback and set foot on the peak again. Approved? By the way, how do you know my name? He actually wanted to overthrow the Underworld Merchant Guild and replace them. You son of A.B. *TCH. The blue little boy was silent for a while after hearing this. In other words, the blue little boy had just given them 320,000 soul coins. They hated the Underworld Merchant Guild to the core. They desired revenge and to make the Shadow King's former dream a reality, which was to overthrow the Underworld Merchant Guild. You've been approved, Muhai. Shadow Killer suddenly laughed as he looked at the Sea King who was in doubt. Hypnosis would not cause such great pain to his soul. It seemed to contain treasures that could make them rich overnight. What should we do next? Wait for the Sea King to come out or return to Bakey? The dog asked. If he hadn't been hypnotized and revealed his inner thoughts, it would mean that Shadow Killer had seen all his memories. All right, even though you're not fated to inherit it, you've at least gotten 16 chances to resurrect on the spot. Be content, Lu Chai said. It was because of him that all the revenants of the Shadow Legion had found a home. It could be said that everything in a mausoleum was built by the Shadow Master. After all, he had seen all his memories, which meant that he had no secrets to the Shadow Killer. It was as if he had seen through everything. However, Shadow Killer knew about this at this moment. After all, such an idea seemed a little too crazy to him. Hearing the blue little boy's self-introduction, the Sea King was expressionless. Hearing Shadow Killer's words, the Sea King's heart thumped. He couldn't help but say, however, what surprised the blue little boy the most was that the Sea King was actually the Shadow heir chosen by the Shadow Master, Elder Shadow. He felt that if he really did that, he would be the next one lying inside. Then a huge suction force came from the teleportation passage and sucked them in. Thinking of his Shadow Master, a hint of respect appeared in the blue little boy's eyes. Meanwhile, in the Shadow Tomb, all of a sudden, the players realized that their line of sight was retreating rapidly until they reached the deepest part of the cave. This was because he had never told anyone about his intention to overthrow the Netherworld Merchant Guild. Don't at least tell us why. Shweli suddenly let out a scream. I didn't expect you to want to overthrow the Netherworld Merchant Guild and replace it. That's a great idea. I have high hopes for you. Shadow Killer laughed loudly. Thinking of this, all the players could not help but be stunned on the spot. They could not help but look at the crystal coffin. Moreover, to the Sea King, it was more believable that Shadow Killer had looked through all of his memories. Everything had become interesting from the moment he had decided to rob the Death Lord's ability to his death. After that, he had roped in the 7 nations and established the Mutesi Nation. To the blue little boy, this experience of turning over a new leaf from the bottom of the valley was very valuable. In the blink of an eye, they had returned to the underwater space where the dragon head pillar was. Let's go. The blue little boy spoke again with a serious expression. He then waved his hand at the players. In his opinion, what was the point of being the owner of the Shadow Legion if he could not mobilize it? Was he just a decoration? Hearing the 2 guild leaders say so, the players naturally had no objections. They sat in a circle and began to wait. Shadow Killer nodded. I can't exchange it for money. I won't buy it, even if I have the money. I'm not a pay-to-win boss. I might as well buy equipment, Shweli said gloomily. Let's wait. I'm curious if the Sea Leak can succeed. Guyu immediately answered. After looking through the Sea King's memories, he now understood why Shadow Killer had chosen the Sea King as a successor. Suddenly, the souls of the Sea King, Hei Sui, and the others that were on the verge of collapse finally stopped trembling. Thinking of this, he gave up on looking through the Sea King's subordinates' memories. With a wave of his hand, he extracted the soul-praying fluid from the Sea King and his subordinates' bodies. Just now, I've looked through all of your memories since you were born. So you're acknowledged by me. Shadow Killer did not hide anything and told the truth. The Shadow Legion was the biggest enemy of the Netherworld Merchant Guild back then. Hearing this, the Sea King suddenly realized something and his heart started to race. Shadow Killer's words confirmed the Sea King that Shadow Killer had indeed looked through his memories. At this moment, the players were in a terrible mood. However, When he turned to look at Hay Sway and the others, he felt that it was not the case. However, after ending the rule of the Void Ocean, the Sea King's experience had piqued the blue little boy's interest. The sudden wealth caught all the players off guard. To them, the resurrection token was an exclusive tool for pay-to-win bosses. Even if they had the money, they would not buy it. If they had the money, they would definitely spend on other things to improve their strength. Thinking of this, the Sea King could not help but look at the crystal coffin floating in the air. At this moment, many people present had the same thought as Schwelly. All of you leave. The inheritance is not fated with you. What's wrong? Guyu could not help but ask curiously. As a 3-year veteran player, he had not encountered his own opportunity until now. Now that he finally had a chance, how could he be willing to give it up? All the memories from the Sea King's birth until now flashed across the blue little boy's eyes like a slideshow. Continue to grow. You're still unable to compete with the Netherworld Merchant Guild now. Therefore, the appearance of a Shadow Legion will only bring you endless trouble instead of benefits. It's not the right time yet. Therefore, he did not even mention it to the few lords who were his closest subordinates. At this moment, the Sea King learned from the players. He put on an arrogant posture and pointed his middle finger at Shadow Killer. According to the current market price, the soul praying wine that could resurrect 3 times in full condition would cost 60,000 soul coins. Therefore, one resurrection would cost 20,000 soul coins. After that, the Shadow Master spent countless days and nights brewing the soul-praying wine to nourish their souls so that they could continue to guard the Shadow's mausoleum. Otherwise, they would have been sucked into the 6 paths of reincarnation and reincarnated. Don't be angry. You've gained my approval. In other words, from now on, you're the master of the Shadow Legion. Chapter 634. The Sea King could not help but nod after understanding the meaning behind Shadow Killer's words. Although he did have the intention to replace the Underworld Trade Union, it was unrealistic for him to become enemies with them now. He was only a subsidiary of the Underworld Sea Branch War Chamber of Commerce. Not only did he not have a strength, but he also did not have the qualifications to do so. Therefore, Shadow Killer's meaning was clear. If he wanted to use the power of the Shadow Legion, he had to become strong enough himself. The Sea King could not help but roll his eyes at this thought. At this moment, he suddenly felt like he had obtained a rich treasure but could not use it. All he could do was stare at it helplessly. Is there no other benefits from this inheritance? The Sea King asked, slightly unwilling to give up. Shadow Killer smiled and shook his head. He then waved his hand at the crystal coffin. Suddenly, a black crystal floated out of the opened coffin and slowly floated to his palm. After carefully examining it, a trace of nostalgia appeared in Shadow Killer's eyes. He then gently pushed the crystal toward the Sea King. This is the Shadow King's lifelong effort. After receiving his inheritance, you will be the new Shadow King and can mobilize the Shadow Legion at will. As long as you want, the Shadow Legion can appear at any time. However, I still hope you will consider it carefully. The Sea King heard this and nodded. He reached out and took the black crystal floating in front of him. The moment his finger touched the crystal, it suddenly dissipated into specks of starlight. Then, as if they were summoned, all the starlight gathered and rushed toward the Sea King. Countless knowledge, spells, and other inherited memories came one after another, constantly surging into the Sea King's mind. When the Sea King received the inheritance, the way Shadow Killer looked at the Sea King changed. It was no longer casual, but extremely solemn. This was because after the Sea King received the Shadow King's inheritance, he was the new Shadow King and also his master. Time passed. When the Sea King came back to his senses, for hours had passed. Although he had not completely digested the memories in his mind, the Sea King was extremely happy. In addition to the spells of the Shadow Clan, the sea knowledge left behind by the Shadow King was also a very rich inheritance. It would be of great help to his future development of the sea. At this moment, the Sea King knew that he had made a huge profit this time. At this moment, Shadow Killer landed and floated in front of him. He then knelt on one knee and lowered his head. My king! Boom! As soon as Shadow Killer finished speaking, All the terracotta soldiers in the royal mausoleum faced the Sea King at the same time and knelt on one knee, silently declaring their loyalty to their new master. After a brief moment of shock, a smile appeared on the Sea King's face, and it gradually became more arrogant. In the underwater space, the players were still waiting for the Sea King's return. During this period, some of them were chatting in the live chat channel, while others were scrolling through forums, watching videos, listening to music, and so on. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin was panicking. Since he was not familiar with these guild members, he did not speak in the live chat channel, nor did he open the forum to kill time. That was because when he opened the forum, no matter how many lives he revived on the spot, it would not be enough to kill him. His days in the future would be even more miserable. He was not boasting. At this moment, he had criticized all the players sitting around him on the forum. Therefore, he could only sit there foolishly, unable to do anything. "Brother, why don't you find something to do?" At this moment, Gozi's voice rang out from the side. Mo Xiaoxin's heart tightened when he heard that. He then turned to look at the dog, who was swaying to the music with a smile on his face. "What's wrong? Is something the matter?" "Nothing. I just saw that you're not chatting in the live chat channel, and you're not scrolling through the forum. I just wanted to ask if you're not bored." As the dog spoke, he continued swaying his head, exuding the aura of a silly husky. As danger approached, Mo Xiaoxin had an idea in this critical moment. "I'm actually talking to a friend. It's not like I have nothing to do." "Oh, I see. Sorry to disturb you. Please continue." The dog did not suspect anything. He continued swaying his head and walked to the side. Seeing the dog leave, Mo Xiaoxin let out a long sigh of relief. As expected, it's dangerous to stay with these guys. It's better to avoid contact with them in the future. As Mo Xiaoxin's thoughts ran wild, the teleportation gate beside him suddenly fluctuated with energy. Then, several figures appeared. All the players present immediately looked at the teleportation gate. Just as they expected, the people who came out were the Sea King and his subordinates. At this moment, the players raised their middle fingers at him in unison. Seeing this, the Sea King smiled awkwardly. Even at this moment, he did not know that the inheritance was originally prepared for him. He thought that he had snatched the inheritance that belonged to the player clan, so he could not help but feel a little embarrassed. Moreover, before entering the underground tomb, everyone had agreed on how to distribute the inheritance. He did not expect that he would monopolize it. Therefore, he was not surprised by the uniform middle fingers. If he were to put himself in the player's shoes, he might have lost his mind from anger. After obtaining the shadow inheritance, he knew very well how valuable it was. Therefore, in his opinion, the player clan had suffered a great loss. "Sealik, how is it? Did you succeed?" the dog asked curiously. "Yes, I succeeded." The Sea King did not intend to hide it and answered truthfully. "Then the Shadow Legion is already under your control?" "You can say that, but they can't come out. Sai, it's hard to explain. Just treat it as if I obtained the inheritance, but can't use it," the Sea King said helplessly. Hearing this, the players could not help but whisper in the live chat channel. "TSK, TSK. It seems like the Sea Leak has become fat again. That's gratifying. That's very good. But we have to pick up the pace. Otherwise, it'll be awkward if the knife can't cut the leak." Looking at the silent players, the Sea King said shamefully, "Why don't you follow me back to Exinamo Island, and I'll compensate you?" Looking at the silent players, the Sea King said shamefully, "How about this? Come back to Exinamo Island with me, and I'll compensate you? Sealik, give me 10 of your newly built Mute warships. Sealik, didn't you guys breed a batch of spiritual turtles in Exinamo Island? Give me a ship. It'll be very useful. Sealik, I want..." When the players heard that the Sea King was going to compensate them, they reported their items without hesitation. They did not hold back at all. Looking at the players who were still chattering, the Sea King pulled a long face. "Why the F Astra CK are you still reporting? I might as well give you the entire Mute Sea Nation." Of course, he would not say this out loud, because he was sure that the shameless player clan would nod in agreement without hesitation. Thinking about this, the Sea King said angrily, "Shut up, all of you. How about this? I'll give you 10 sea Tyrannosaurus whelps and a ship full of high-level spiritual materials as compensation." Hearing this, the players raised their middle fingers at the Sea King in unison. The Sea King was speechless. He still remembered the last time the player clan raised their middle fingers in unison. It was during the Smoke Dragon fleet's meeting with all the forces in the sea. At that time, he was still laughing at the side. He did not expect this day to come. "All right, I owe you guys a favor. Don't think it's too little. The Mute Sea is currently in a stage of rapid development, and we don't even have enough resources for ourselves. Squeezing out these to compensate you is already the best I can do. Otherwise, it will affect my future development plans." "That's it then. Do we go back with you to claim it, or do you want to send it to Bakey?" Guyu asked with a smile. "Either way, boss, let's go back with Sea Leak and stay there for a few days. We'll eat until he's broke." The Sea King sneered at him. "Silly dog. Even if you want to entertain us, there's no room for pets. We could talk about preparing a cage for you to stay in for a few days." The Sea King sneered at the dog. At that moment, the dog was so angry that he stood up. In the end, the players decided to follow the Sea King to Exinamo Island. After leaving the underwater space, they swam toward the surface. Due to the existence of the underwater whirlpool, the players had a hard time moving forward. However, at that moment, Imo Xiaoxin's ability caught everyone's attention. Not only did his body turn into a cloud of gray mist, but he was also able to shuttle through the underwater whirlpool without being affected at all. They had never seen such an ability before. They had not even seen it in the encyclopedia of skills collected by the players in the forum. Out of curiosity, Guyu sent a question to Imo Xiaoxin in the live chat channel, expressing his desire to know what kind of skill it was. Imo Xiaoxin was shocked once again. In the skill introduction of the negative entity, it was clearly stated that this ability relied on gathering the elements of other people's negative emotions to grow. If he were to reveal the details of the skill now, he would be suspected. In fact, he did not want to use this skill at first. However, since his level and equipment were not as good as Guyu and the others, he could not withstand the pressure and tearing force of the underwater whirlpool at all. If he did not use the skill, he would definitely be pulled and torn into pieces. Although he could resurrect on the spot with the resurrection tokens, he was in the center of the underwater whirlpool. It would be a waste of resurrection tokens if he resurrected, but he would still die in the middle of the whirlpool. Left with no choice, he could only activate his void form ability to shuttle through the whirlpool. However, Imo Xiaoxin suddenly felt pressured by Guyu's question. Therefore, he had an idea and began to explain the theory of the skill verbally, but he did not intend to reveal the details of the skill at all. Although Guyu and the others were confused, they did not think much of it. Finally, after some effort, everyone floated to the surface of the sea. Initially, the Sea King was ready to fly directly to Exinamo Island. However, he was surprised to find that the players had summoned warships on the surface of the sea. Therefore, he decided to bring Hei Sui and the others to board the ship to go home. On the way to Exinamo Island, the Sea King could not help but ask the players enviously what their space item was. How did it have such a huge storage space? And where did they get it? Of course, the players would not tell the truth. Racial innate skill. The Sea King naturally did not believe it, but there was nothing he could do. Meanwhile, on Exinamo Island, Elder Ing, who had been waiting in the dark for a few days, was filled with doubts. Just a few days ago, he realized that the treasure chest he left at the bottom of the sea had been taken away. He already knew that someone had discovered the place. Therefore, for the sake of safety, he changed his follow-up plan. This was also the reason why the Sea King could obtain the coordinate map that was dug out from deep underground. All of this was specially prepared for him by Elder Ing. The recipe recorded at the back of the coordinate map was the recipe for the soul-praying wine. When the Sea King left Exinamo Island to investigate the location marked on the coordinate map, Elder Ing knew that his plan was only one step away from success. He was currently hiding on Exinamo Island for the sake of this final step. As he was worried that the Sea King could not figure out how to brew the soul-praying wine, he was prepared to complete the brewing of the soul-praying wine as a sea wanderer after the Sea King returned. However, what made Elder Ing extremely depressed was that the Sea King had not returned even after a few days had passed. However, he did not know that the Sea King, who was originally going to investigate, had already obtained the Shadow's inheritance. There was no need for him to make any follow-up arrangements. Once again, the script did not go according to Elder Ying's plan. It skipped the middle step and went straight to the end. Chapter 635. It was as if the passage to the jade-shattered star had been extended infinitely, with no end in sight. After that, Lu Wu stopped paying attention to Gu Yu and the others. Instead, he focused on learning from Lil Bailey. However, the current situation was that there was no crack in the space wall, but the flow of energy from the formation inside was extremely slow, as if it was restricted by some unknown force. Get ready, everyone. The space passage is restored. On this day, Lu Wu was studying theoretical knowledge in the artifact space, as usual. He asked Lil Bailey about it, but Lil Bailey shook her head and said that she was fine and had a good appetite. He was so excited that he was ready to call Lil Bailey. The sky and the ground seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see. As his palm touched the space wall, he closed his eyes and began to investigate the reason. Lu Wu did not think much about it. Through the artifact, he looked at Gu Yu and the others who were guests on Shima Island. Lu Wu felt that their relationship had become complicated and indescribable. What made him speechless was the relationship between the players and the Sea King. After looting the resources from a jade-shattered star, Lu Wu thought that there might be another batch of resources coming, so he left a mark there. Her idea was actually very simple, which was to limit the teleportation time from the Heaven Realm to the jade-shattered star, so that Lu Wu had enough time to prepare for the looting. However, the leading demigod was no longer worried. He was thinking of reporting the matter to his superiors when he returned to the Heaven Realm, so that they could deal with the problem of the space passage. Thinking of this, these cultivators were extremely uneasy, and their faces were pale with fear. Under the leadership of a demigod realm expert, more than 100 cultivators activated the space tunnel that led to the jade-shattering star and stepped into it. Yes, they had arrived at their destination. Lu Wu saw this and asked curiously. However, the moment they were sent out of the space passage, they saw a dense crowd of people. As his voice trailed off, the people in the passage saw a glimmer of light in front of them. Although they were confused, their nervousness dissipated instantly. The biggest problem at that time was time. However, Lu Wu noticed that Lil Bailey's mood had changed recently, as if she had something on her mind. The soul power stored in the artifact began to burn violently. "What are you doing?" Soon, his face lit up with joy because the speed of the space passage seemed to have recovered. Lu Wu was speechless. Through the player's perspective, Lu Wu also discovered that the Sea King had obtained the Shadow King's inheritance. Originally, he thought that there was a problem with the spatial barrier and was extremely nervous, but he didn't show it. In other words, the teleportation was still going on, but the speed had been reduced to an extremely low level. At this moment, they could not help but panic. Since Lil Bailey didn't want to talk about it, Lu Wu didn't force her. He continued to study hard. No matter what, as long as he had enough strength, all difficulties and challenges wouldn't be a problem. But now, their mission this time was to deliver a batch of spiritual materials needed to refine ghouls to the Black Desert, which was stationed on the Jade Fragment planet. After all, no matter how smart Lord of Shadows was, he could not be as smart as Lil Bailey. No matter how much knowledge he had about the sea, it could not be as vast as Lil Bailey's. In that case, there was a high chance that the team transporting the goods would immediately choose to return to the Heaven Realm and report the situation. Upon seeing that, the leading demigod stage powerhouse immediately stretched out his hand and pressed on the space tunnel beside him. Don't worry, this formation was set up by the heavenly mystic deity lord. There won't be any problems. At this moment, the leading demigod stage powerhouse spoke in a deep voice, trying to calm everyone down. After saying that, Lil Bailey began to operate the artifact and remotely control the teleportation formation through the space node left in the teleportation formation. However, what he didn't know was that what they were facing now was the downpour attack that Lil Bailey mentioned. From his point of view, As long as there was no problem with the spatial barrier, they would be safe, and there would not be any life-threatening situation. Give them a downpour attack, Lil Bailey said with an unfathomable expression. In fact, when they robbed the first batch of goods, Lil Bailey had already thought of how to rob the second batch of goods. In other words, they were about to arrive at their destination and would not have to wait for a long time. However, they realized that the feedback from the artifact this time was not directed at the players, but at the extraterrestrial planet, the Jade Fragment Planet. This place might even be extremely far from the three realms. Even if they spent a lifetime there, they would never be able to return. At the same time, Lil Bailey also left a feedback mark at the teleportation formation that connected the Jade Fragment Planet and the Heaven Realm. They were already very familiar with this process. Lu Wu, who had already received the inheritance of Lil Bailey, was not affected at all. He felt that the inheritance of the Lord of Shadows was just a little brother. This was also the reason why the goods transportation team from the Heaven Realm could not reach the Jade Fragment Planet, even though they were in the space passage. Soon, he opened his eyes again, and a puzzled expression appeared on his face. Now, from a specific understanding and application of the battle artifact to the training of combat techniques, Lu Wu's life was very fulfilling every day. He had already said goodbye to the days where he would call Lil Bailey whenever he needed help, and Lil Bailey whenever he needed help. Lu Wu immediately put down the book in his hand and began to search for the reason. The area that would normally only take a few minutes to reach now might take them a few hours. One had to know that the Sea King and the players were like fire and water back then. The demigod powerhouse who noticed the change in the space passage became serious and pressed his hand on the space barrier again. At this moment, the artifact suddenly responded. The artifact's feedback point was the teleportation gate of the Heaven Realm on the Jade Fragment Planet. At this moment, Lil Bailey's figure appeared beside him and nodded at him solemnly. Hearing her words, the cultivators in the passage were still very nervous. Lil Bailey, who had considered this issue, immediately thought of a solution. Thinking of this, he immediately turned to look at his subordinates and said, at this moment, their figures were shuttling through the space passage, waiting for the teleportation to end. At this moment, in the Kation region of the Heaven Realm, time was ticking away, but they still had not reached their destination. What welcomed them was not the black desert station here, but a creature that they had never seen before, the form of the Sky Devil. Lu Wu's first failure to act cool gave him a great motivation. But soon, they noticed that something was wrong. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? At this moment, a figure hovering in the sky said to them with a sinister smile. At this moment, the teleportation time in the passage became extraordinarily long. Boss, I understand. It's time to get to work. After knowing the reason, Lu Wu realized that the next batch of goods from the Heaven Realm to the Jade Fragment Planet might be arriving soon. After all, if something happened in the space passage, it was very likely that they would lose their way and be abandoned somewhere in the outskirts. Therefore, in order to better act cool in the future, he decided to study hard and improve every day. After all, the space barrier was a guarantee of safety. If the space barrier was broken, the violent space flow outside would completely tear them apart or send them to an unknown area in the outskirts. It would only take a few minutes for the transportation team from the Heaven Realm to reach the Jade Fragment Planet. When they arrived, they would see the bombed city and the huge sinkhole. Therefore, it was very important to seize this batch of goods in time. Lu Wu did not have much time to prepare. At this moment, the space passage suddenly shook, and the suction force in front of them increased greatly. Chapter 636. I can see it now. He didn't expect me to attack him at close range. He was obviously defenseless. What a weak battle instinct. Brothers, hold him back. I'll finish him off. Lu Wu used all his strength in this attack. Therefore, he turned around and shouted without hesitation. The spiritual energy was unbelievably pure. After it was connected, it exploded with unimaginable power. It was more than 10 times stronger than the spiritual energy he used. This attack messed up his body and made it impossible for him to continue fighting. Kufeng's face was filled with shock. At this moment, his eyes were wide open. His pupils were bloodshot, and his pores were oozing red. His body swelled up like a balloon. Although their spells could be described as overwhelming in terms of quantity, they were far inferior in terms of quality. Big Meat Shield, tell him that sneak attacks are nothing. A man should face them head-on. After being beaten up hundreds of times, Lu Wu had memorized the order and position of his attacks. He was terrified because Lu Wu had retaliated in his own way. As he received more spiritual materials, Niefeng suddenly turned around and looked at who was controlling the zombie army. He felt a surge of vitality and a spiritual energy that he had never seen before in Hui's body. In contrast to Lu Wu, Kufeng was on the verge of breaking down. On Lu Wu's side, even Kufeng, who had the strength of a demigod, could not take it anymore. He began to pant. Hearing Niefeng's words, the players did not hold back anymore. They did not care about their remaining blue bars and began to attack. In the face of the surging group of players, these immortal cultivators turned pale and decisively pounced toward the portal. Cough, cough. What is this special spiritual energy? Cough, cough. The great joy after the great sorrow did not last long. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the portal and blocked their way. Is there a countdown? I feel guilty when you do this. Since Niefeng had collected the materials needed for the pay-to-win, the players knew that the battle was over. In fact, Lu Wu was not confident that he could defeat this demigod, but he knew that he would not lose in terms of momentum. At that time, he had thought of this, which was why he had returned the hundreds of thousands of battle achievements in the form of items. Killing these powerhouses above the Ghost King realm was naturally not a problem. Even if they did not die in such destruction, it would be very easy for them to deal the finishing blow. Sure enough, I can't stay cool for more than 3 seconds. The meat shield didn't disappoint me. At this time, he found that Kufeng's attacks were very rhythmic. He hit several places on the surface of his body with a purpose, and the spiritual power in his hands would penetrate into his body along with his attacks, forming a node at those places. Such a stance really made Kufeng furious. He could only grit his teeth and attack. After the corresponding set of attacks, the nodes that Kufeng left in his body would connect and cause damage to his body through the surface. That was because the 100 or so immortal cultivators were all enough to be bosses in the development of the players at this stage. He was certain that if it was an opponent of the same cultivation level as him, they would not be able to withstand a few rounds of his attacks and would be heavily injured. What made him feel even more inconceivable was that Lu Wuji hit the spiritual energy left in his body. He had already realized that something was wrong. Seeing this scene, Kufeng's heart skipped a beat. Moreover, the amount of this spiritual power was not even 1/3 of what he released, but it was still on par with him. It was even faintly suppressing him, and it was constantly getting stronger. Thinking of this, he gritted his teeth and dashed towards Lu Wu resolutely. As the flames rose, the medicinal herbs were thrown into the alchemy cauldron in batches, and the law of darkness in his body fluctuated. Seeing this, Lu Wu's face became extremely solemn. With a soft shout, the golden light on the surface of his body blossomed into a golden lotus that rotated slowly behind him. When the abnormality occurred in the space passage, the 100 or so immortal cultivators who were escorting the supplies were filled with fear. This was the benefit of not being greedy after the previous cross-border war. Therefore, it was not realistic to end this battle quickly. This set of spirit body was specially used for close combat. Initially, he had seized Lu Wu's flaw and wanted to attack continuously, completely suppressing him so that he could not escape and counterattack. However, he seized this opportunity and approached Lu Wu decisively. Activating the close combat technique, Spirit Body, he began to perform an infinite combo on Lu Wu. While the players were discussing, they simultaneously pounced on the 100 or so immortal cultivators below. Fine, I'm not good enough. You can hit me. I won't fight back. Therefore, the appearance of these creatures seemed to indicate the current situation of Xian and Mo. Hearing that the rewards would be shared together, some players were tempted, and some immediately chose to mail the spiritual materials stored in the space to Niefeng. He could vaguely feel the surging vitality and strength in this person's body, so he was not confident that he could win against this person. Brothers, as usual, we will share the rewards together. You provided the materials with corium gold, and we will share them together. Isn't a battle a turn-based system where you punch me and I punch you back? How dare he perform a combo? That's too much. The big meat shield has changed. It's his job to take the beating. How dare he act cool just now? But I'm relieved to see this. Taking advantage of the time when Kafong retracted his arm, Lu Wu imitated his attacking method. He changed his fist into a palm and slapped Ku Feng's abdomen, followed by his left chest, right lower armpit, and between his eyebrows. 10,000 gold taels as soon as the bomb goes off. Art really burns money. Laughing emoji. Compared to Xian Mo, who was stationed here, Lu Wu was still a notch weaker. If Xian Mo couldn't withstand the attack, then there was no hope for him. This was because there shouldn't be any living creatures on this deserted planet, except for Xian Mo and his immortal disciples. At this moment, Kafong already knew that he couldn't escape death. He bent his body and asked Lu Wu with bloodshot eyes. At this moment, his first thought was to return to the heavenly realm immediately. Shinra Tensei. The power of this attack was very clear. It could be described as destroying heaven and earth. The power had exceeded the highest value that they knew at this stage. If he had been one step slower, he would have been hit by this attack head-on, and he would have been injured. At this moment, his internal organs were shaken, and he was half dead. In fact, Lu Wu couldn't resist at all. However, the way back was blocked. It would be too late if he didn't break out of the encirclement. More than 3,000 node imprints were made in Lu Wu's body, and these imprints were connected more than 40 times. However, the fact was that the opponent in front of him was not only unharmed, but also nodded from time to time. Sometimes, he even showed a look of realization. At this moment, Niefeng's voice sounded in the live chat channel again. However, the players' attacks couldn't make any significant impact. Faced with the defense formation set up by more than 100 powerhouses above the Ghost King realm, it was impossible to break through in a short period of time. Ahem, brothers, do you want to do something artistic? Therefore, in Ku Feng's opinion, this person's internal organs should have been shaken into a pile of mud. In fact, he had done it. At this moment, Ku Feng was dumbfounded. He didn't expect to succeed so easily. However, their only hope, the teleportation portal, had failed again. Looking at the falling cauldron, Niefeng opened his hands in a showy manner. This was because such a close combat method could break through the enemy's defense and directly cause internal damage to the enemy's body. As they waited, the cauldron became more and more unstable, and cracks began to appear. When the two collided, their bodies shook at the same time. Although Lu Wu wasn't familiar with this set of attacks, the exhausted Ku Feng couldn't dodge at all. He felt numbness on the part of his body that was hit, and he couldn't exert any strength. It was Lu Wu's incarnation. Although it had been a while since the last explosion, it was still fresh in their minds. The earth-shattering scene had truly shocked them. As time passed, the cauldron began to shake, and the players' faces were filled with anxiety. During the attack, Ku Feng was very vigilant, ready to defend against Lu Wu's possible counterattack. Ku Feng felt a great deal of pressure, but he still gritted his teeth and chose to approach Lu Wu. He swung his right elbow at Lu Wu's face. The spiritual power in his body surged crazily and gathered in his right hand. A green energy ball formed in his right palm, and he swung it at Lu Wu's face. They naturally knew who this person was and what art he was talking about. Bomberman, remember to warn us before you blow up. Don't kill us too. To Lu Wu's surprise, he sent him flying. Lu Wu didn't answer. Instead, he smiled and pointed behind him. If he had pocketed all the rewards back then, there wouldn't be any players who would hand over the spirit materials they had worked so hard to collect to him. Then, in the distant sky, a huge black fireball was slowly falling to the ground. The art of explosion was about to be activated again. Niefeng smiled when he saw the inbox notifications that kept ringing. What he wanted to do now was to return the favor to Ku Feng. Are my zombie spirits here to carry your cauldron? He turned around and stared at him. The battle began, and it was a one-sided battle for both sides. The Bomberman will cast the spell with the longest channeling time. Forbidden spell, explosion. The channeling time will take at least half an hour, so please wait a little longer. Laughing emoji. At this moment, Kofone was terrified. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in the live chat channel. Niefeng saw this and activated the wings of death on his back. His body and the cauldron floated into the air. Thinking of this, he charged forward with a howl. Seeing that Niefeng had yet to speak, the players suppressed the hundreds of cultivators below, preventing them from leaving even though they were afraid of being killed by the explosion. It was indeed beneficial to have a long-term vision. I'm begging you. We're all brothers. I have to help you with this. Niefeng begged He with an expression of being bullied. Interesting. I'll learn it, Lu Wu thought to himself. At this moment, a golden dragon surged out of Lu Wu's right arm. With a roar and a flick of its tail, it soared into the sky and swept past Ku Feng's previous position. This was because he couldn't see any hope of killing Lu Wu. However, the enemy in front of him had withstood more than 100 rounds of attacks. His expression was still the same, and he didn't seem to be injured at all. At this moment, a smile appeared on Niefeng's face. In the face of the players' crazy attacks, these cultivators struggled to hold on, not daring to let their guard down. Among them, there was no lack of powerhouses in the Ghost Emperor realm who were stronger than the Sea King that the players were familiar with. However, this joy soon disappeared. Although the weakest among the hundreds of material transportation members was in the mysterious realm, Ghost King, they were filled with despair when faced with a locust-like group of players. Although Lu Wu was being beaten, he was also learning from the brutal beatings. Compared to Lu Wu, who was being brutally beaten up, the army of players was beating up more than 100 immortal cultivators, making it hard for them to breathe. At this moment, Lu Wu took advantage of the moment when Kofeng was in a trance. He suddenly twisted his body and punched Kofeng's wrist. Upon hearing this, Kofeng trembled as he supported his body and slowly turned around in the air. However, when the space passage was restored, their hearts were filled with joy. Although the internal injuries were fleeting and could be healed immediately by the soul power, Lu Wu was very curious about Kofeng's attack method. Although Lu Wu tried to struggle, no matter if he stretched his arms or legs, he would be seen through and stopped on the spot. At this moment, his face was filled with disbelief. After glaring at Niefeng again, he nodded helplessly. Wah! The moment he opened his mouth, Kofeng spat out a mouthful of blood and looked very dispirited. At this moment, the players who were watching the battle from afar nodded in agreement. He was very clear about his own strength. Hearing this voice, the players' expressions became very strange. Don't worry, let's watch the fireworks first. I'll tell you the answer later. When they walked out of the space passage and looked around, what greeted them was not the black desert that was stationed here, but densely packed creatures that they had never seen before. Quick, enter the space passage and return to the heavenly realm. Out of reflex, he dodged to the side and decisively chose not to fight them head-on. At this moment, the surface of his body was shining with a pale golden light. The well-proportioned muscles on his body tightened, and he spread out his arms. Looking at the hundreds of cultivators in front of him, it was as if he alone could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. Under such circumstances, Lu Wu's expression changed from excitement to helplessness and finally to numbness. After being hit by 108 consecutive blows, Kofeng's face suddenly turned pale. He felt an inexplicable force in his body connecting and then exploded with a terrifying force. Knowing what was about to happen, many of the Chinibyu players followed Niefeng's example and raised their arms, shouting arrogantly along with Niefeng. He did not believe that Lu Wu could hold on forever. At this moment, Kofeng, who was the leader, felt his heart sink. He could not enter at all, as if there was a transparent barrier in front of him. Seeing this, Niefeng immediately took out a huge alchemy cauldron from the storage space. At the same time, he also summoned the 4 zombie spirits of the Ghost King realm to help he resist the huge cauldron and lift it up. Under such circumstances, Kofeng was unable to hold on physically and mentally. After each blow, a part of the Emperor's energy in Lu Wu's body would seep into his body in preparation for the final explosion. At this moment, the Emperor's energy in his body gathered towards his right arm, which was immediately enveloped in a golden light. Bang! Below, the battle between the players and the cultivators was also going on fiercely. Big Demon King, help me carry the cauldron. Chapter 637. Upon hearing Lu Wu's words, Kofeng immediately turned his head to look behind him. In his line of sight, a black ball of light slowly landed on the ground and immediately emitted a dazzling black light. In Kofeng's disbelief, the black light swept over at an extremely fast speed and engulfed everything in front of him. Soon, his vision was occupied by the darkness. At the end of the scene, he heard the sound of the formation shattering and countless terrified screams. Boom! Accompanied by a loud noise, Kofeng closed his eyes, which were stung by the light. His white hair danced in the strong wind. At this moment, a violent force came along with the strong wind. It seeped into his body and destroyed his already weak body. Kofeng still kept his eyes tightly shut as he felt his vitality leaving his body. At this point, he already knew that he could not escape death. However, the fear of death seeped into his heart, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. His body began to rot bit by bit under the erosion of the dark precept. His body was also aging at an extremely fast speed. This process was stretched infinitely in Kofeng's heart, making him feel even more tormented. Time passed. After an unknown amount of time, Kofeng felt that his body no longer hurt. He could not even feel the existence of his body. At this moment, he wanted to try to open his eyes. However, the action that should have been easy became extremely difficult at this moment. After many attempts, when a crack appeared in the darkness and light seeped in, his vision seemed to be covered by a layer of blurry white, making him dizzy. As time passed, his vision gradually became clear. At this moment, he saw the completely changed landscape of Jadesplit Star and his charred body. I am not dead. Looking at this silent world, Kofeng wanted to support his body and stand up. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not do it. So thirsty, so tired. At this moment, Kofeng suddenly realized something. Where did all the strange creatures around him go? Why did they disappear? After waiting for a while, Kofeng still did not see the grim reapers who would end his life. At this moment, a desire to live surged in his body. Did they think that I was dead and left? Thinking of this, he resisted the drowsiness and turned to look at the portal. When he found that the formation set up by Tianqian Deity King was still intact, Kofeng's desire to live reached its peak. He slowly lay on the ground and crawled toward the portal. However, as he moved closer to the portal, fear rose in Kofeng's heart again. The moment he thought he was going to die, the fear in his heart faded. But now that there was hope, it also gave him the fear of death. He was afraid that the moment he was about to succeed, those strange creatures would return and kill him. Faster, just a little faster. At this moment, his willpower supported him to continue moving. Although his speed was not fast, Kofeng had used all his strength. Time passed bit by bit. Kofeng had no idea how long he had been crawling. The moment his hands came into contact with the portal, he had no idea where he got the strength to drag the doorpost and send himself into the portal. After entering the spatial passage, he finally couldn't hold on any longer and fainted in the passage. But Kofeng knew that he had survived. However, what he didn't know was that there was a pair of eyes watching his struggle to survive and his departure. When Kofeng thought that he had survived, the person behind the scenes also smiled. When he opened his eyes again, Kofeng found himself lying in the center of the formation. He was surrounded by 8 doctors who were activating the formation. He was puzzled and wanted to speak, but he realized that he couldn't feel the existence of his body. At this moment, a doctor in front of him suddenly turned to look at him. "You're awake?" Kofeng wanted to ask what was wrong with him, but he couldn't speak at this moment. As if understanding what Kofeng wanted to ask, the doctor looked at him solemnly and said, "Your body has been completely destroyed. We don't have the ability to restore it, but we are trying to build a new body for you." Relax, it will be over after a good sleep. Hearing this, Kefeng's heart trembled, and his soul couldn't stop trembling. My body is destroyed? How is that possible? Kefeng knew very well what it meant that his body was completely gone. It meant that everything he had learned in his life had been destroyed, including the God Seal that was about to ignite the God Fire. Not only would he have no hope of becoming a god, he would have to start from scratch. No, he wouldn't even have the possibility of starting from scratch, because these doctors couldn't create a body that was completely compatible with his soul. He couldn't have a future. Thinking of this, Kefeng's soul couldn't help but fluctuate violently, and the doctors couldn't help but frown. Let his soul sleep for a while. We can't continue like this, the doctor in the lead said at this moment. As soon as he finished speaking, Kefeng, who was still in a state of shock, felt everything around him become blurry, until it disappeared. When he woke up again, Kefeng found that he had become an immortal disciple with no spirit chi in his body. Everything that he once had was gone. After he woke up, the first thing he did wasn't go through the normal procedures to check his body's adaptability. Instead, he was brought to the Heavenly Policies Department for questioning. Kefeng didn't hide anything and told them everything that had happened on the Jade Fragment Planet. After the heavenly god in charge of questioning got what he wanted, he looked at Kefeng and said, "A creature that has never been seen before? In that case, it should be an invasion from the outer realm. We will carry out the follow-up investigation. You can go back first." Hearing these words, Kefeng hurriedly asked anxiously, "Immortal Sir, what about my follow-up arrangements?" "Oh, we have already signed you up for the Heavenly Fault Academy. You can start cultivating again first. Your position will always be reserved for you. When you cultivate to the demigod realm, we will arrange for you to take up the position again." Hearing this, Kefeng was dumbfounded. Cultivate to the demigod realm? He was just an ordinary immortal disciple now. He didn't dare to imagine how long it would take to cultivate to the demigod realm. In addition, this new body and soul couldn't be perfectly integrated, so it was extremely difficult to cultivate. Therefore, he felt that the Immortal Sir's words were simply bullsh**. Is there no other arrangement? Kefeng asked again, unwilling to give up. You'd better cultivate well and don't think too much. I will go and report the situation first. If there are other arrangements, I will inform you. The heavenly god frowned slightly and said impatiently, "Yes." Although he was unwilling, Kefeng suppressed the urge to explode and nodded. Then he turned and left. The god smiled disdainfully as he stared at Kefeng's departing figure. In his opinion, Kefeng was just too unlucky to have encountered the forces of the extraterrestrial realm. As for him wanting to take back what belonged to him, that was simply impossible. The resources of the heavenly realm were distributed according to strength. It would never be wasted on a useless person who could never rise again. Arranging for Kefeng to enter the Heavenly Imperial Academy and giving him everything he had previously promised to cultivate to the demigod realm was purely a perfunctory act for the outside world to see, because he knew that it was impossible for Kefeng to cultivate to the demigod realm. His physical body and soul couldn't be perfectly matched. The difficulty of Kefeng's cultivation would be 100 times, 1,000 times, or even more than that of an ordinary immortal disciple. 5 days later, Heavenly Realm, Eternal Path Domain, Heavenly Imperial Academy. It wasn't the day of external recruitment that happened once every 10 years, but on this day, the Heavenly Imperial Academy welcomed a newcomer. His arrival aroused the curiosity of many Heavenly Imperial Academy students. In their opinion, the arrival of this newcomer had obviously broken the rules set by the Heavenly Imperial Academy. As one of the 32 top academies in the Heavenly Realm, the Heavenly Imperial Academy only accepted a fixed number of new students every 10 years. It never accepted more or less. It was all based on the entrance trial results, from the highest to the lowest. However, not only did this student not need to go through the trial, he even skipped the once-in-a-decade recruitment rule and was directly accepted. This caused quite a stir in the Heavenly Imperial Academy. After a detailed understanding, the Heavenly Imperial Academy students felt even more incredulous. Because this newcomer was actually just an ordinary immortal disciple, and hadn't even started cultivating. Someone with connections. Without even needing to guess, Kufeng, who had just arrived at the Heavenly Imperial Academy, was labeled. And the arrangements that the higher-ups of the Heavenly Imperial Academy made for this newcomer caused a huge stir in the Heavenly Imperial Academy. The newcomer directly received the highest heavenly level resources in the academy and didn't need to challenge the trial, directly entering the heavenly class. While this news shocked all the Heavenly Imperial Academy students, some people also hated him because of it. The reason was very simple. Heavenly Imperial Academy's heavenly class was the class with the most resources allocated and was the goal of many students. However, the sudden addition of a newcomer was equivalent to occupying an important position, causing a few students who originally had hopes of entering the heavenly class to lose all hope. And the Heavenly Imperial Academy students recruited a fixed number of students every time, precisely because the distribution of resources was fixed. His addition also shared the amount of resources that everyone received. Although the amount was not much, all the students were filled with indignation. If he had entered the heavenly class with his own strength and received the highest resources, although they would be envious or jealous, they would definitely not be as aggrieved as they were now. Thus, many people secretly targeted him. In reality, Kufeng knew very well what was going on outside. Half a month ago, he was a demigod who was about to enter the immortal ranking, and even the person in charge of the Heavenly Imperial Academy was nothing in his eyes. Perhaps in the eyes of other students, the heavenly class resources he received did not match his strength at all. But to Kufeng, he didn't want these low-level resources at all. What he wanted was the follow-up arrangements from the higher-ups of the Heaven Realm, to give him an explanation, to give him a future. But as he waited, he didn't get any follow-up arrangements. Clearly, the higher-ups had already given up on him. Now, they were using these resources that he had once disdained to brush him off. At this moment, Kufeng's heart was filled with despair. The path of cultivation was full of difficulties. From an ordinary student to an official immortal in the Heaven Realm, he had spent his entire life. It could be said that he had basically spent his entire life cultivating. But now that he had reached the demigod realm and was about to enter the immortal ranking, he had to start from scratch. This kind of blow was simply unbearable. Under such circumstances, Kufeng's heart was under great pressure. But after struggling with his thoughts, Kufeng still chose to continue cultivating. Back then, it was cultivation that sent him to a high position, and now he would use cultivation to take back everything that he had lost in the past. But the second blow came very quickly. Just as he had thought, the incompatibility of his soul made it difficult for him to continue cultivating. Just the simplest method of gathering qi into the body, the position of the soul was actually slightly different from the position of the body. This caused him to suffer several times during cultivation. He could not cultivate and did not make any progress, and in serious cases, he almost lost his life. This once again gave Kufeng despair. But in the eyes of the other academies, his performance could only be described with one word: trash. He had clearly easily obtained resources that others could not get even if they worked hard, but he did not make any progress at all, wasting the cultivation resources that should have been used reasonably. As a result, more and more students began to secretly target Kufeng. On this day, as usual, Kufeng came to the school's dining hall after his cultivation. He walked to the front seat marked Sky Class and sat down. Then, he picked up his cutlery and began to eat. Just then, he suddenly felt a headache, and then a pile of food slid down from the top of his head. I almost fell sorry. Just then, a voice came from the side. Kufeng looked up and saw a female student holding an empty food box and looking at him apologetically. Hearing this, Kufeng nodded silently and did not say anything. He lowered his head and continued to eat. Bang! Just then, another box of food hit Kufeng's head. Sorry, the road is slippery. At this moment, Kufeng was filled with anger. However, before he could react, a food box flew from not far away and hit him hard in the face. Then, a voice came from afar. Sorry, my hand is slippery. Bang! 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 Before Kufeng could fly into a rage, countless food boxes were thrown at him from all directions. The anger that had been accumulating for a long time completely exploded at this moment, and almost all the students in the dining hall joined in. Soon, Kafong was buried by the food. His heart was filled with anger, but apart from anger, he had no way to fight back, because he was just a good-for-nothing now. After this day, the secret targeting was put on the table. They put laxatives in his food, poisonous bugs in his bed, and stole the resources he received every time. At first, the higher-ups of the academy tried to stop them, but things went out of control when all the students in the academy joined in. Therefore, the higher-ups chose to indulge them. Knowing that Kafong was a demigod, they chose to give Kafong the best treatment to please him. This was because, like Kafong, they felt that the higher-ups might make arrangements for him and that his stay here was temporary. However, there was no reply, which meant that Kafong had been abandoned. Therefore, they no longer had the thought of pleasing Kafong. After this, they made their choice. At this Heaven Academy meeting, after all the students had arrived, the person in charge of the academy announced something in front of all the students in the auditorium. Kufeng's status in the Sky class and the allocation of resources. Hearing this news, there was an uproar, followed by cheers. However, Kafong was dumbfounded when he heard this news. He had wanted to rely on this batch of cultivation resources to cultivate again. Although it was extremely difficult, he had never given up. At this moment, Kafong couldn't help but stand up and shout at the person in charge in front of all the students. Why? Obviously, the person in charge of the academy didn't expect Kafong to say this at this time. Resources are allocated according to need. The effect of your cultivation is so low, you can maximize the value by allocating it to others. Looking at Kafong, the person in charge of the academy said indifferently, "Value maximization? F***CK, your value maximization. Do you know why I ended up in this situation? Do you see what I've done?" Kufeng's face became ferocious. Even when he was in a desperate situation, he didn't give up. However, everything around him was the first to abandon him. This environment was so oppressive that he couldn't breathe. At this moment, he finally couldn't take it anymore. The person in charge of the academy didn't argue with Kufeng. He just looked at him and said quietly, "This decision won't change. You can choose to give up, or you can use your strength to take back everything. Prove to me that you can do it." Kufeng didn't say anything, but he clenched his fists. Was he going to use cultivation to prove it again? "I will do it. I can do it." At this moment, Kufeng clenched his teeth and swore secretly. It was proven that after his body was reforged, cultivation was no longer something that could be made up for with hard work and hard work. Countless times he clenched his teeth and persevered, but there was no reward. On the contrary, the students bullied him even more crazily. After he was deprived of the qualification to join the Sky class, these students didn't give up on torturing him. Instead, after knowing that he had no one to rely on, they became even more aggressive. After the cultivation ended, Kufeng, who was pale, stood up and wanted to walk out of the cultivation room. However, he found that the door of the cultivation room was closed. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't push it open. Just as Kufeng was worrying about this, several figures came from behind. Then, a stick hit Kufeng's head fiercely and he fell to the ground. Kufeng panicked and was about to stand up immediately. At this moment, another stick came from the side and hit his face. Two of Kufeng's front teeth were smashed by this blow. Before he came to his senses, he felt the back of his head hit again and his vision became blurry. Before he fainted, he heard a sentence. "Brother Yao, if it weren't for him, you would have joined the Sky class. I've helped you vent your anger. Let's go. Don't get found out." When Kufeng woke up again, it was already late at night. He sat up and looked at the pool of blood on the ground and the two broken teeth not far away. A desolate smile appeared on his face. He used to be an immortal, but that was only in the past. Now that he had been reduced to such a situation, he no longer had the pride he used to have. In fact, he knew very well that he couldn't practice any tricks at all. However, the unwillingness in his heart made him choose to continue to practice, so as to numb himself or to deceive others. But at this moment, Kufeng's mentality had changed. He useless? Touching the back of his head, Kufeng's face gradually became ferocious. "Don't give me a chance. I will take revenge. I will. From an immortal to an ordinary student, Kufeng's heart was filled with resentment after experiencing so many things in this period of time. The celestial master of the Heavenly Policies Department said that he could only return his status when his cultivation reached a certain level. The person in charge of the school said that resources were only given to talented people. The student said that he was useless and that his existence was just a waste of resources. Everything was inseparable from his own strength. At this moment, he yearned for strength. He yearned to become stronger, and he yearned to take revenge one by one. Evil thoughts grew in the depths of his heart. The moonlight shone in through the window. In the reflection of the pool of blood on the ground, Kufeng's face was ferocious. At this moment, Kufeng found that he had grown a new black front tooth through the reflection of the moonlight. Chapter 638. But this time, he was the culprit. This time, Dongwang Tai was ready for a thorough investigation. However, no one knew that Kufeng's heart had changed a long time ago. He had obtained the tooth of Dongwang's clone, but he did not dare to use it to make a totem. The crowd burst into laughter again. The repressed emotions from cultivation seemed to have been released at this moment. Remember those words, and then die. He wanted to endure for a while longer, but at this moment, he could not hold it in any longer. He needed to vent. Along the way to the stage, he fell 4 times, but his face was still expressionless and no emotions could be seen. None of you can leave today, Kufeng said in a hoarse voice. At this moment, the face of the person in charge of the academy turned gloomy. But this time, Kufeng's cultivation was not for the illusory future, but for the strong desire for revenge in his heart. This speed of strengthening was so fast that his soul could not take it anymore. But Kufeng did not stop the strengthening. He greedily absorbed the power in the tooth. One of the prayer beads on Kufeng's body trembled slightly, and an unimaginable surge of power burst out, sucking the person in charge of the academy into his hand. But before he was strong enough, he chose to endure. Today, in the great hall of Tianke Academy, what he wanted was for Kufeng to lose his patience and choose to leave Tianke Academy. At this moment, he tripped again and fell to the ground. At this moment, the statue suddenly became lifelike and opened its eyes. Because this was not what he wanted to see. Can you do whatever you want with strength? Come up, the person in charge said with a smile. At this moment, Kufeng seemed to have become an outlet for these students to vent their frustrations during their oppressive days of cultivation. All of their negative emotions were released by Kufeng. At this moment, Kufeng stood up slowly, then turned around and grinned at the person in charge of the academy. From Kufeng's point of view, the black tooth had endless power to support his consumption. It seemed that if he wanted to, he could reach the top of the immortal state in a short time. Now, he just wanted to get rid of Kufeng. The show was about to begin. Lu Wu was all smiles, ready to watch the show. When he passed by, he would definitely knock him to the ground on purpose. The bronze god tree and the others could not find the divine artifact space where the totem was, but Dongwang Tai might not be able to. Kufeng's daily training continued, and the students' malice towards him never decreased. At this moment, the auditorium was filled with laughter. It was then that Kufeng realized that he had grown a new black incisor. At this moment, the whole audience burst into laughter. At this moment, his strength was rising without limit. It was obvious that his plan had failed. Sensing the surging power coming from Kufeng's body, the person in charge of the academy had a terrified expression on his face. This was because Kufeng would only be a burden and a waste of resources in the academy. Moreover, it would be very disadvantageous to them during the academy's grading. Kufeng's feet were blocked. His body leaned forward and fell to the ground. As he spoke, he tossed the charred corpse of the academy's person in charge to the side. Immediately after, the 3 rosary beads on the surface of his body suddenly rotated, and a barrier suddenly rose up around the auditorium, blocking all paths of exit. Although he was a student, Kufeng's life here was worse than a dog's, and he suffered all kinds of torture. After all, in terms of strength, the gap between Dongwang Tai and the bronze god tree was too huge. Life went on as usual. Every day, he would eat in the corner of the academy's dining hall. Occasionally, some students would pour the leftovers into his lunchbox. Witnessing this scene, the entire auditorium was in an uproar. Then, the students began to run out of the auditorium in fear. Thinking of this, Dongwang Tai closed his eyes and began to sense the negative body that he had no idea where it was. What surprised him even more was that the weak body that he had created was becoming more and more compatible with his soul under the transformation of the tooth. Kufeng, who had fallen to the ground, did not speak. He stood up quietly and continued to walk forward. Upon hearing this, Kufeng silently raised his head and looked at the Academy's person in charge in confusion. On Lu Wu's side, at this moment, the screams and cries of the Academy's students sounded so beautiful to Kufeng. That day, he was beaten up in the cultivation room and broke 2 of his incisors. After that battle, when Kufeng was in a coma, Lu Wu left something in his mind and gave him this negative body tooth that belonged to Dongwang Tai. As soon as he finished speaking, the flames on the surface of Kufeng's body surged toward the Academy's person in charge and burned his body into charcoal. At this moment, Kufeng could not stand it anymore. "At least I can treat you well," the Academy's person in charge replied with a smile. "Kufeng, come up." Seeing the Academy's person in charge die in an instant, they were terrified and realized the crisis. However, he could feel a surging power from this tooth. It was like a vast ocean, endless and boundless. "Do you want me to leave on my own?" At that time, he had investigated it. Kufeng did not refute and chose to remain silent. This was also the reason why Kufeng could return to the heaven realm safely. He had no idea that he had become Lu Wu's pawn. Therefore, he wanted Kufeng to back off and leave on his own. Just a few days ago, he felt that something was wrong with his body. At this moment, a leg stretched out from the aisle and tripped him hard. He did not know why the tooth grew. At that time, he tried to absorb the power from the tooth. As a result, he did absorb an extremely pure power. This power was purer than when he was in the demigod realm. Its quality was impeccable. However, he chose to accept the adversity. This discovery gave Kufeng hope again. So, he began to cultivate again. During this period of time, Kufeng's strength rose at a rapid speed. This was because the appearance of the totem would definitely be sensed by the East Emperor Tai. He chose to use all his strength to extract the power from the black tooth. However, as his strength continued to grow, the humiliation that Kufeng had suffered in his daily life also made the evil in his heart grow. Surrounded by a dense fairy aura, a golden statue stood in the center of the fairyland. After the Academy's person in charge read out the cultivation performance of each class this year, he asked the representatives of each class to come up to the stage to give a speech describing their experiences in cultivation. Kufeng finally chose to stand up and walk along the aisle to the podium where the person in charge was. Lu Wu dared to take the risk. Then, he looked through the artifact at Kufeng, who was in the heaven realm. However, he would not say out loud. After all, it was the higher-ups who ordered Kufeng to stay. His head hit the stairs hard, and blood gushed out. Kufeng's answer made it clear that it was impossible for him to leave on his own. The biggest problem seemed to have been solved because of the appearance of the tooth. After they spoke one by one, the Academy person in charge suddenly turned to look at Kufeng, who was sitting in the corner of the auditorium. Kufeng still did not speak. After he got up, he did not even look back to see who did it. Kufeng could not help but shout excitedly as his strength kept increasing. The 10 rosary beads on the surface of his body were circling at this time, constantly transmitting the energy that the East Emperor needed. Insulting, torturing, teasing, anything they could think of would be used on Kufeng. Kufeng's strong soul supported this crazy strengthening. Black flames burned on the surface of his body, and a horn grew on both sides of his forehead. Then, 3 black balls appeared on the surface of his body. At this time, Kufeng suddenly turned to look at him, and then reached out to grab him. He knew that this day would not be long. No, how could it be? After all, you are the person that the higher-ups gave me. I will not lose you so easily. However, Kufeng's expression did not change, which made the Academy person in charge feel uncomfortable. Looking at Kufeng, who came to the podium, The Academy person in charge smiled and said at this time, Kufeng suddenly looked at the Academy person in charge and said, Kufeng, tell us about the techniques that you have mastered in cultivation. Feeling the power that was constantly flowing out of his body, the East Emperor Tai's face showed a solemn expression. The appearance of Kufeng naturally became Lu Wu's target. Different from the Heaven Realm, the fight for resources here was not so blatant. Under the false glamour, there was a thick layer of darkness. Therefore, Lu Wu thought of a way to find a celestial from the Heaven Realm to inherit the tooth of the negative body that could absorb the East Emperor Tai's power. After seeing through the artifact that the hidden chess piece was finally activated, a smile appeared on his face. In this way, even if the East Emperor Tai used the connection of the negative body, he would only find the person who inherited the negative body, not Lu Wu. On Kufeng's way down the podium, the Academy person in charge, who was in a bad mood, waved his hand and formed a barrier under Kufeng's feet. He had seen this kind of situation before. However, since he was not the one whose power was absorbed, it was impossible to investigate with just a description and simple investigation. It was very similar to the situation encountered by the Celestial Masters in the Bronze God Tree. It was as if a negative body, which was the opposite of their original body, had appeared and was absorbing the original body's power. Although he was puzzled, he chose to give up at that time. Hearing this, the Academy person in charge sneered and replied, Yes, I am. Before a thorough investigation, he naturally would not act rashly and alert the enemy. Instead, he secretly made preparations. He planned to find the guy behind the scenes once the connection between him and the negative body became closer. Now, I will return everything that you have given me. Very well. I hope you remember this sentence and bring it to hell with you. Thinking of this, he took out a bag of Lil Bay, Lee's potato chips, opened it, and calmly took out 5 pieces and stuffed them into his mouth. According to what they said, this was an academy, a place where cultivators should stay. Since they could not even gather spiritual energy into their bodies, it would be better for them to leave. This way, they could share less resources with others. It seemed that everyone was happy to see Kufeng make a fool of himself. Looking at the terrified expressions on the faces of the students below, Kufeng sneered. Well, it's good that you understand. Kufeng smiled, turned around, and walked down the podium. He did not want to continue talking nonsense. Every time Kufeng was allocated the cultivation resources, they would be taken away immediately, leaving nothing behind. Heaven Realm, Heavenly Realm. Obviously, this time, the negative body was absorbing the power in his body crazily, and the connection had become very strong. With a strong soul as the carrier, obtaining a huge amount of power at once did not affect Kufeng at all, including the Academy person in charge. After many attempts, he knew that the higher-ups no longer cared about Kufeng, so he lost his patience. Chapter 639. Black flames rose in the auditorium of the Heavenly Fault Academy. At this moment, Kufeng, who was once trash in the eyes of the students and could be easily bullied, became their fear. In the face of death, they no longer had the arrogance they once had. They all cried, begged for mercy, and madly slapped the barrier that blocked them from leaving. Kufeng revealed a ferocious smile as he looked at the familiar faces. From now on, I won't tolerate it anymore. What you've given me, I'll return it all. Thinking of this, Kufeng laughed maniacally. The constant absorption of the power contained in the teeth had already put his soul in danger, but he still greedily absorbed it without any intention of stopping. Since you can decide the fate of others just because you are strong enough, I will decide your fate now. Boom! At this moment, the 4th black rosary bead condensed on the surface of Kufeng's body. It circled around his body, and the burning flames around him became even more turbulent. The flames spread at this moment, igniting the bodies of the students in the auditorium under the horrified gazes of the students. Amidst the cries, Kufeng slowly opened his crimson eyes and stretched his hand forward. The prayer beads around him vibrated, and the bodies of all the students in the auditorium were crushed by an invisible force, turning into a mist of blood. Hiss! Kufeng took a deep breath. Suddenly, the The blood fog gathered and flowed into his mouth. At this moment, Kufeng had completely abandoned his bottom line. The evil thoughts in his body had devoured the cowardice in his heart. It was as if the shackles had been unlocked, and Kufeng felt comfortable all over. Boom! At this moment, the fifth black prayer bead formed on the surface of his body. At this moment, his body had also grown to a height of 800 meters, like a mountain. Looking at the Heavenly Fault Academy below, Kufeng started to move. He stomped his foot forcefully, causing the ground to shake violently. Following which, with him at the center, cracks spread out in all directions. At this moment, the rosary beads on the surface of his body also trembled along with his thoughts. At this moment, the surrounding buildings were shaken into dust by this invisible force, and the dust spread outwards rapidly like a doomsday storm, turning everything in its path into nothingness. The Heaven Imperial Court, one of the 32 academies in the Heaven Realm, became history at this moment. Roar! Kufeng looked up and roared excitedly. With the help of the prayer beads, his voice spread out and soon spread throughout the entire Eternal Path domain. This was Kufeng's declaration of war. He wanted to break the rules. He wanted to destroy everything. At this moment, all the Heaven Realm experts in the Eternal Path domain were horrified. They flew into the sky and looked in the direction of the Heavenly Imperial Academy. Roar! The deafening roar sounded again. And so, Kufeng's destruction began. The 5 rosary beads spun rapidly around his body, and surging power flowed into his body. At this moment, Kufeng suddenly punched the ground. With him as the center, a berserk energy swept out, and the island began to tremble violently. Countless rocks floated into the air, disintegrating bit by bit, turning into powder. The island also disintegrated under this force, turning into yellow sand that scattered in the air. Stop! At this moment, a silhouette appeared above Kufeng's head. Then, a golden pagoda descended from the sky and pressed down on Kufeng's head. Kufeng remained unmoved in the face of the attack, falling from the sky. He continued to press his fist against the ground. The power in his body continuously flowed into the ground and disintegrated the island. Just as the golden pagoda was about to collide with the top of Kufeng's head, a rosary bead on the surface of Kufeng's body suddenly left his body and went up to the pagoda. Buzz, buzz, ripples of sorcery spread out from the point of collision. In front of the immortal's incredulous eyes, his pagoda began to disintegrate. In the blink of an eye, it turned into scattered pieces and collapsed. Seeing this, the immortal's face was filled with fear. However, before he could react, the black rosary suddenly disappeared from where it was and immediately reappeared in front of his forehead. Bang! Blood splattered everywhere. The rosary bead pierced through his head and crushed his body at the same time. Roar! Bathed in the rain of blood, Kufeng looked up to the sky and roared excitedly. Then he raised his hand and punched the ground. At this moment, the floating island also disintegrated completely, turning into countless pieces that fell to the ground. At this moment, Kufeng's body suddenly shot towards the ground, crashing down like a burning meteorite. At this moment, the immortals who were observing in secret could no longer sit still. They all flew towards Kufeng. One after another, boundaries were formed below, and countless figures emerged. They wanted to join forces to stop Kufeng's destruction. Kufeng, who had completely lost control, had bloodshot eyes. He did not dodge at all and slammed into the boundaries. Crack! A crack appeared in the boundaries. As the 5 black rosary beads rotated, the cracks began to spread like a spider web. The moment Kufeng broke through the boundaries, the immortals in the heaven realm below revealed looks of disbelief. Dying. Looking at the densely packed figures of the immortals, Kufeng's face revealed a maniacal smile. At this moment, one of the rosary beads on the surface of his body shattered. Then, an extremely terrifying force suddenly swept across the surroundings and swept past the bodies of these immortals. Along with a series of explosions, none of these immortals managed to escape the explosion of the rosary beads. All of them turned into a mist of blood. Ha ha ha! Seeing this scene, Kufeng laughed arrogantly. Then, his body turned into a fireball again and fell to the ground. The moment his body came into contact with the ground, flames swept across. Countless buildings and immortal disciples were turned into ashes in the flames. At this moment, Kufeng was like a world-ending demon king, bringing fear and destruction to this eternal path domain. This was also what he wanted to do. When the shackles in his heart were completely broken, resentment and hatred were catalyzed. He had long lost his rationality. More accurately, he had lost his bottom line. Since this world had chosen to abandon him, then he would destroy it. He would make everything disappear under his own power. Under the drive of this crazy thought, everywhere Kufeng passed by turned into a sea of flames. At this moment, a mountain covered with talismans suddenly appeared in front of Kufeng. Kufeng didn't stop. He slammed into the mountain. Boom! The ground collapsed. Just like that, Kufeng flattened the mountain and moved forward bit by bit. At this moment, the figure in the dark also spat out a mouthful of blood. He completely did not expect Kufeng to be so powerful. This power was something that even he could not resist. At this moment, Kufeng suddenly stretched his hand and grabbed towards his left. A huge suction force came over. Before this heavenly god could react, he found himself in Kufeng's hand. Under his horrified gaze, Kufeng threw him into his mouth and chewed. His soul was already on the verge of collapse. The intense pain did not bring Kufeng unbearable pain. Instead, it brought him a hearty release. Roar! His roar resounded through the realm of eternal path once again, bringing the fear of death to all living beings in the realm of eternal path. Suppress. At this moment, a voice was heard. Immediately, Kufeng, who was advancing forward, fell to the ground, following which strange patterns appeared on his limbs, locking him on the ground and making him unable to move. At this moment, a figure appeared in the sky. The figure was dressed in green and stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. He looked at Kufeng with a solemn expression. How did you step through the heavenly gate and enter the heaven realm? Kufeng, who was locked on the ground, did not answer. He continued to absorb the power contained in the teeth. Bit by bit, he raised his hands and supported his body. Seeing this, heavenly mystic celestial lord, who was standing in the sky, revealed a surprised expression, following which he shouted again, "Suppress." As soon as he finished speaking, he spat out a huge golden word that landed on Kufeng's body and suppressed him on the ground again. I asked you, how did you enter the heaven realm? Heavenly mystic celestial lord looked at the struggling Kufeng and questioned him again. Heavenly mystic celestial lord, haha, I want you to die. Kufeng's body trembled violently, and he used all his strength to struggle. Heavenly mystic celestial lord was an expert in the heaven realm that he had once admired. However, to Kufeng, he deserved to die. He had done so much for the heaven realm, but all he got in return was abandonment. Therefore, he hated everything here. And heavenly mystic celestial lord was one of the people who set the rules. Roar! As he roared, one of the rosary beads on the surface of his body shattered, and the explosive power tore the huge golden word apart. Under heavenly mystic celestial lord's disbelieving gaze, Kufeng's body rose into the sky and pounced on him. Heavenly mystic celestial lord did not retreat. Instead, he slapped at the huge black palm. A huge golden palm expanded against the wind and collided with Kufeng's right arm. Violent wind pressure swept in all directions. At this moment, Kufeng's face revealed a trace of madness. The remaining 3 black rosary beads exploded at the same time. The violent power instantly blew Kufeng's right arm into a bloody mist. The power from the explosion of the rosary beads turned into a blood-red palm print, smashed heavenly mystic celestial lord's golden palm print, and hit him squarely. At this moment, even heavenly mystic celestial lord could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and his body flew backward. Ha, die! Kufeng laughed hideously as he pounced on heavenly mystic celestial lord and bit him. At this juncture of life and death, heavenly mystic celestial lord's eyes turned golden. His hands formed 3 immortal seals, and he mobilized all the celestial spiritual power in his body to form a huge golden beast, which collided with Kefeng's body. Dying, Kefeng hugged the huge golden beast and bit its neck. He tore off a piece of golden flesh, swallowed it, and then raised his head to bite again. Heavenly Mystic Celestial Lord's face was incomparably gloomy. His golden eyes blinked, and he controlled the huge golden beast to counterattack. He did not expect Kefeng to be so strong that he could fight with him. Somehow, Heavenly Mystic Celestial Lord felt that Kefeng's ability was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. However, at this moment, Heavenly Mystic Celestial Lord did not have time to think too much. He immediately unleashed his full strength, ready to kill Kefeng. This time, without the support of the black rosary beads, Kefeng could no longer unleash his full strength. He was getting weaker and weaker under Heavenly Mystic Celestial Lord suppression. Seeing this, Heavenly Mystic Celestial Lord smiled, and then he controlled the huge golden beast to crash into Kefeng's body. At this moment, the huge golden beast melted into a golden liquid, and it slowly enveloped Kefeng. "It's over," as Heavenly Mystic Celestial Lord murmured. The golden liquid suddenly exploded. Under this attack, Kefeng's body finally could not take it anymore. His body became extremely broken, and he fell from the sky. Seeing this, Heavenly Mystic Celestial Lord smiled. At this moment, in the artifact space, Lu Wu, who was observing everything, smiled when he saw Kefeng's death. Then, an arcade machine appeared in front of him. With a raise of his hand, countless soul coins gathered and turned into a game coin. Then, Lu Wu stuffed it into the arcade machine. "Resurrect on the spot." Following Lu Wu's shout, the game coin that was formed by the soul coins instantly arrived in the heavenly realm through the artifact. What Lu Wu needed to do was simple. He needed to awaken Kefeng's soul that was about to fall and reconstruct his body. East Emperor Tai would naturally pay for the energy that Kefeng consumed during the battle. Lu Wu did not need to waste his soul power at all. This time, he wanted to personally control Kefeng in the battle. "I want to play too?" At this moment, Lil Bailey, who was beside him, said eagerly, "1 life per person. If I die, I'll replace you." Lu Wu held the joystick and said generously. Chapter 640. Tianxin Deity smiled as he looked at Kefeng's broken body that had fallen to the ground. He landed on the ground. "Since I can't get anything out of him, I'll search his soul and find out the truth." He was very curious about how this person crossed the divine gate and entered the heavenly realm. Suddenly, a blue ball appeared on the surface of Kefeng's body and exploded into a blue mist that flowed into Kefeng's body. Tianxin Deity looked on in disbelief as Kefeng's broken body slowly recovered. At the same time, the teeth of a negative entity connected to Dong Huang Tai's body began to extract the energy from Dong Huang Tai's body. 1 bead, 2 beads, 3 beads. When the 3rd bead was formed, Kefeng suddenly opened his eyes and pounced on Tianxin Deity who was approaching him. Seeing this, the heavenly mystic immortal lord's eyes turned golden again. He decisively summoned his golden beast and charged forward. To his surprise, Tianxin Deity detonated 3 beads this time. The berserk energy that was stirred up shattered the golden beast and sent it flying. Boom! A huge crater appeared on the ground. Tianxin Deity's clothes were torn and his white hair was dancing in the wind. He fell to the ground hard. He felt an unbearable pain all over his body and spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, Tianxin Deity was terrified. He was sure that Kefeng was already dead. However, for some unknown reason, he had actually revived on the spot. Even his physical body had been reconstructed, and the power that he had used up was restored to its original state. Tianxin Deity endured the pain and stood up as Kefeng pounced on him. He formed a seal with both hands and summoned his giant golden beast to confront Kefeng. Meanwhile, in the artifact space, Lu Wu held the joystick and hit the buttons at the same time with a serious expression. For Lu Wu, the only word that could describe the feeling of playing arcade games was thrilling. There were 8 buttons in total. The joystick controlled up and down. The button extracted Dongwang Tai's energy. The B button punched. The C button kicked. The D button exploded beads. An E button pounced at the same time. There were the combinations of each button. At this moment, Lu Wu turned into a game boss and started to control Kefeng to beat Tianxin deity. Lu Bu had been very pleased with the heavenly mystic immortal lord, the person in charge of the heavenly policy mirror. Now that he had this opportunity, he naturally wanted to repay him. Tianxin deity monarch was powerless to resist, so Lu Wu controlled Kefeng to whip his face. Who asked you to set up hidden chess pieces everywhere? Pa! You F*** king, set Sangshu up. Pa! This is what you get for plotting against the human world. Pa! Who asked you to set up a spatial passageway in the outer realms to plot against the nether realm? Pa! Up, down, down, left, left, right, right, Alibaba. Pa, pa, pa. While Lu Wu was having fun, Lil Bei Li, who was at the side, had a longing look in her eyes. She found it really fun and wanted to play. However, just as Lu Wu was about to kill the heavenly mystic deity lord, several figures suddenly appeared on the screen. They struck at the same time and suppressed Kefeng, who was beating the heavenly mystic deity lord. Then, countless spells bombarded him, blasting Kefeng's body into pieces. Game over. A line of words appeared on the screen. Lu Wu slapped the arcade machine and spent 50 million soul coins to condense a game coin. Just as he was about to insert it into the arcade machine, Lil Bailey suddenly said, "Let me do it, let me do it." Upon hearing this, Lu Wu helplessly handed the game coin to Lil Bailey. After all, they had agreed that each of them would exchange their lives for the game coin. After receiving the game coin, Lil Bailey jumped onto the seat and inserted the game coin into the arcade machine. At this moment, a blue ball appeared above Ku Feng's broken body. After it exploded, it turned into countless blue mist and flowed into his body, restoring his broken body to its original state. The battle started again. This time, Lil Bailey was facing the siege of 3 heavenly realm deity lords. Holding the joystick, Lil Bailey began to hit the keys with a serious face. Unlike Lu Wu's simple operation, Lil Bailey tried to use combination control from the beginning. Faced with the 3 deities, Lil Bailey first adopted a defensive strategy. Instead of directly exploding energy, thought explosion beads, to attack like Lu Wu. She planned to absorb energy from the teeth and condense more thought beads before waiting for the right time to explode. Lil Bailey called this move accumulating rage points. Obviously, in terms of gaming talent, Lil Bailey crushed Lu Wu. As time passed, Lu Wu could not believe that Lil Bailey actually withstood the attacks of the 3 deity lords at the same time and condensed the 8th black thought bead. Watch carefully. At this moment, Lil Bailey suddenly shouted. Her hands turned into a phantom and pressed down with a series of crackling sounds. Lil Bailey's first combo move, Fire, Arrow Mallet. In the video, a thought bead on the surface of Ku Feng's body suddenly shattered. Then, Kefeng used the force to hit the chest of the deity lord in front of him. The deity lord's face turned pale, and he took a few steps back. Obviously, the deity lord did not expect Kefeng, who had been on the defense, to suddenly counterattack. He was caught off guard and was hit on the spot. Lil Bailey's second combo move, Howl Bite. In the video, Kefeng suddenly pounced on the deity lord who had fallen and bit his ear. Lu Wu was dumbfounded by the scene. What the F*** CK? He even played a combo move. I'm afraid we're not playing the same game. Looking at Lil Bailey, who was pressing the exploding Immortal Lord button with a serious expression, Lu Wu suddenly felt like he was Lil Bailey's pendant, weak, wronged, and useless. Although she was weak, Lil Bailey's ability to control everything was so strong that it made one's hair stand on end. When Lu Wu was controlling the deity lord, although he was in awe, he still felt awkward. After all, it was only the most basic control, and he could not smoothly connect various abilities. However, after Lil Bailey familiarized herself with the defense, she could skillfully control Kefeng, and it was extremely smooth. Defense, attack, defense, accumulation of chi, explosive chi to attack. especially the showy, self-created Lil Bailey 18 moves. It could only be described as brutal. When the ultimate move, Strangle Throat, was performed, it almost strangled the soul of a deity lord out of his body, and he died on the spot. At this moment, Lil Bailey looked like she could pass all the levels with one game coin. When she was in high spirits, she stood up from the chair, and her hands turned into a phantom. Lu Wu was dazzled by her movements and could not learn them even if he wanted to. Ha ha ha, I see the flaw ahead, Hammer. Eat my combo, lie down for me. Humph, stupid guy. You are not worthy to be my enemy. This is a crushing defeat in terms of intelligence. Did you think I was going to punch? Wrong. Continue with the head hammer. Lie down. Explosive chi dodge, move, move, move. You can't hit me, right? Go behind you, strangle throat, suffocate. Looking at Lil Bailey, who was getting more and more arrogant, Lu Wu fell silent. Although he did not want to admit that talent existed, Lil Bailey's actions told him that it existed. The same control of Kufeng, everyone started from scratch. Lil Bailey had only been playing for a while, but he was already a max-level player. He could even teach and guide combos. At this moment, Lil Bailey's technique was still improving. Not only did he learn how to control Kufeng to fight, but he had also begun to study the moves of the three deity lords in front of him to find their flaws. As for him, he was still a newbie player and only knew the simplest moves. Lu Wu, who was watching the battle from the sidelines, looked like a newbie in an arcade who was looking up at a boss who had cleared all the levels with game coins. His face was full of envy and longing. If only I could be so awesome. The battle was still going on. By accumulating rage, Lil Bailey's every move put great pressure on the three deity lords. What made them even more helpless was that every time they were about to make a hand seal and attack, Kufeng seemed to be able to see through it and began to dodge in advance. Fighting with Kufeng made them feel that they were full of flaws. In the end, the deity lords who had no choice but to fight Kufeng with all their might, regardless of whether they were injured or not. They wanted to create an opportunity to kill Kufeng even if they were injured. Under such circumstances, Lil Bailey suddenly controlled Kufeng to hug one of the deity lords. Then, the 10 prayer beads on the surface of his body exploded at the same time. Accompanied by the notification of game over, Lil Bailey took the deity lord away. Lu was dumbfounded by the scene. He had killed a celestial master. What a great deal. You do it. I've just started and I'm not very familiar with it. Give me some time to think about my technique. I'll do it next time. Lil Bailey nodded at Lu Wu. Lu Wu was speechless. Not very familiar with it? Are you serious? At this moment, Lu Wu felt that Lil Bailey had slapped the word talent on his face, causing him a mental blow. Lolas should not be judged by their appearance. The ancients were right. Thinking of this, Lu Wu silently condensed a game coin and threw it into the arcade machine. Soon, Kufeng resurrected on the spot with full health. Under the horrified gaze of the remaining 2 deity lords, he pounced on them. But soon, the fear on the faces of the 2 deity lords turned into confusion. Because this time, Kufeng was very weak. After Lu Wu had been controlling the machine for more than 10 minutes, the screen lit up with a game over as expected. Lu Wu's face was full of tears. He thought that he was a lame player. Thus, the all-powerful Lil Bailey made her grand entrance once again. While the 2 deity lords were still in a daze, Kufeng, who had become stronger once again, began to pummel them. Dong Huangtai was paying close attention to Kufeng, who was fighting with the deity lords. At this moment, he was still searching for the specific location of the negative entity. However, no matter how hard he tried, the negative entity was pointing to Kufeng. There was no hidden force behind it. At this moment, Dong Huangtai frowned. Unwilling to give up, he continued to sense for a while. Finally, he could not sit still anymore, because if this continued, Kufeng would kill the other 2 deity lords. Thus, his figure suddenly appeared in the eternal track realm. With a raise of his hand, he controlled Kufeng on the spot. The force was too strong. No matter how skilled Lil Bailey was, she could not resist it. Then, Kufeng's body was crushed by an invisible force and turned into powder. So, it was Lu Wu's turn again. At this moment, Lu Wu's hand that was holding the game coin was trembling. A newbie challenging the boss? I can't even defeat the small monsters. How can I fight the strongest boss in the final stage? Lu Wu felt that he had no chance of winning. After all, Kufeng's power came from Dongwang Tai. No matter how strong Kufeng was, it was impossible for him to surpass Dongwang Tai. Thinking of this, Lu Wu made up his mind. Since I can't beat him, why should I fight? If you beat me, I will tear your house down. Let's see who is more ruthless. Chapter 641. Dongwang's appearance brought the game that Lu Wu had arranged to an end. In the face of absolute power, Kufeng did not have the ability to fight back. However, Lu Wu did not think so. He immediately condensed a game coin with his soul coins and inserted it into the arcade machine. At this moment, Kufeng's body in the heavenly realm was reconstructed again. Under Dongwang Tai's astonished gaze, the resurrected Kufeng pounced on the city below after reassembling his body. He then detonated the rosary beads that he had just reassembled. As the flames rose, violent power raged in the city of the heavenly realm's eternal trail domain. Lu Wu's idea was simple. Although I can't beat you, I can tear your house down. What techniques? What tactics? If you hit me, I'll demolish your house. If you hit me, I'll massacre your entire city. Lu Wu, who was not good at fighting, immediately thought of a solution. Seeing this, Dongwang's expression turned grave. He immediately stretched out his hand to control Kufeng. He clenched his fist, and Kufeng's body exploded on the spot again, turning into nothingness. Seeing Kufeng's body shatter, Dongwang Tai wanted to grab Kufeng's soul to investigate. But right at this moment, the weapon operated and forcefully sucked Kufeng's soul into the Six Paths reincarnation, escaping from East Monarch Tai's grasp. Sensing the disappearance of Kufeng's soul, Dongwang Tai's body also disappeared on the spot, following Kufeng's soul into the Six Paths of reincarnation. Lu Wu and Lil Bei Li smiled when they saw the scene through the artifact. Be it in terms of control over the Six Paths of reincarnation or the soul, Lil Bei Li was superior to Dongwang. The moment Dongwang Tai entered the Six Paths of reincarnation, Kufeng's soul returned to its original place under Bei Li's control. Then, Lu Wu decisively inserted a coin to revive himself and continued dismantling. By the time Dongwang Tai returned, Kufeng had already turned this city into a sea of fire and rushed to the next city. At this moment, the enraged Dongwang disappeared from where he was. By the time he reappeared, he was already above Kufeng's head. In an instant, he had crushed Kufeng's physical body. However, just as he was about to grab Kufeng's soul was sucked into the Six Paths of reincarnation again. When Dongwang Tai saw this, he decisively followed them again. After going back and forth a few times, Dongwang Tai's face turned gloomy. The 10 beads were activated at the same time, locking down this area and isolating it from the outside world. At this point, although Lu Wu could still use the method of burning soul coins to buy credit and continue to contend with Dongwang Tai, it was no longer necessary. It was because Kufeng's soul had started to disintegrate. Although he could still absorb energy from Dongwang's body, Kufeng's soul, which had been under a heavy load for a long time, could no longer take it. His soul had already begun to crumble bit by bit. Although Lil Bailey had the ability to repair Kufeng's soul, it was too risky. This was because the prerequisite for repairing the soul was to bring Kufeng's soul into the artifact space. However, there was an extremely great risk in doing so. It was unknown whether Dongwang Tai would be able to find the location of the divine artifact space. Lu Wu was no match for Dongwang Tai's strength at his current stage. If he really found him, the consequences would be unimaginable. The reason why Lu Wu dared to do this was because he was prepared to abandon Kufeng's soul. He would never absorb it into the artifact. In other words, as Kufeng's soul started to crumble, this would be his last life. There was no possibility of resurrection. At this moment, Kufeng's face revealed a smile. He stretched out his hand and raised his middle finger at Dongwang Tai. His body was immediately crushed by an invisible force, and his soul disintegrated along with it. Sensing that Kufeng's soul was crumbling at this moment, Dongwang Tai, who originally wanted to search his soul, froze. He stretched out his hand and grabbed at Kufeng's location. Suddenly, a black tooth emerged from the blood mist and fell into his palm. Feeling the energy wave from the tooth, Dongwang Tai's calm face finally showed a slight change. Now he knew why Kufeng could absorb energy from his body. He also understood that his previous guess was right. Someone was using their body parts to create negative bodies. As for where this tooth part came from, Dongwang Tai had already guessed it. It was a hidden chess piece that he had left behind to kill Xiaohao, who had escaped to the outworld. At this moment, it was obvious that this chess game had been broken by someone. Moreover, this person had used this point to counter him. A human force that had escaped to the outworld? Guessing the identity of this person behind the scenes, Dongwang Tai's face showed a trace of seriousness. Everything in the three realms was under his control. The human realm was in the age of degeneration. The grand occasions of cultivation in the past were gone forever. There was no hope for the human realm to rise again. Under the law of the jungle in the underworld, there was endless internal strife. Compared to the heaven realm, their overall combat power was much lower. There was no possibility of them posing a threat to the heaven realm. The only thing he was most worried about were the human warriors that had escaped to the outworld. This was also why he had chosen to continue chasing after the three humans after they had escaped. Because the human race had too much potential. If they were not completely eradicated, there would always be risks. Thinking of this, Dongwang Tai thought of another person. The fear on his face disappeared in a flash. At this moment, he thought of annihilation, but he quickly rejected this guess. If that person behind the scenes was really annihilation, the heaven realm would not be able to fight against him no matter how strong they were. Why would they need to play tricks like this? Thinking of this, Dongwang Tai looked up into the sky. His gaze pierced through the layers of clouds and arrived in the endless void of the outworld. Since you haven't returned after so long, I hope you're already dead. At this time, in the artifact space, Lu Wu and Lil Bei Li were smiling. In fact, the rapid growth of the resentment in Kufeng's heart was all Lu Wu's arrangement. When Kufeng was in a coma on the jade-shattered star, Lu Wu had planted a seed of distortion in his heart. It would explode sooner or later. What Lu Wu did not expect was that the seed would grow so fast. It soon reached the stage where it could be used. This was also his first counterattack against the heaven realm. Since they were enemies, there was no way he would be merciful. Icy Cold used the death battle to unleash the last afterglow of the heaven-defying old era. At that time, Lu Wu swore to usher in the dawn of a new era. The ancestor of the human race, Kung Yi, used his life to protect the descendants of the human race. Lu Wu also swore that he would inherit his will. Lu Wu never said his promise, but he carried it out with his actions. Although he had suffered many losses in the hands of the heaven realm, this time, Lu Wu felt very satisfied. Although he had spent 800 million soul coins in this battle, all of which were used to resurrect Kufeng, the loss he caused of the heaven realm was far more than this number. Moreover, the batch of materials that Kufeng transported to the jade-shattered star was worth 4 billion soul coins. Compared to the income, this amount of expenditure was nothing. Using 800 million soul coins to play an arcade game, Lu Wu did not feel that it was a loss. Instead, he felt that it was very exciting. If Kufeng's soul had not collapsed due to the continuous high load of transportation and could no longer bear the power from the East Emperor Tai, he would have continued to spend money. No matter what, he had to toy with the high and mighty East Emperor Tai and let him know the terror of a pay-to-win boss. At this moment, the arcade game had ended. Lu Wu began to count the materials that he had obtained from this cross-border battle. After a while, the specific statistics of the artifact came out. Types of medicinal materials, 23,145 types categorized as follows: Earth Emperor Essence, Geocentric Soul Marrow, Elixir Soul Serum, Drunken Cloud Immortal Tree, Water Cloud Fruit, Soaring Dragonheart Core, Red Flame Fruit, Sulfur Flame Spirit Saliva, Tiamat Jadeite Essence, Rainbow Moon Orchid, Infant Soul Fruit, Spiritual Dragon Tianji, Geocentric Soul Serum, broken dragon root, rejuvenating grass, red blood fruit. Proportion of low-level spiritual materials, 31. 8% proportion of mid-level spiritual materials, 48. 5% proportion of high-level spiritual materials, 21. 7% total value, converted into soul coins, 4,937,647,432 soul coins. At this moment, Lu Wu felt extremely happy. In order to save Icy Cold and the East Emperor Tai in the 6 paths of reincarnation, he had lost billions of soul coins. Now that he had earned all of them from the Heaven Realm in this way, Lu Wu was happier than the usual way of earning soul coins. At this moment, Lu Wu's heart was surging with emotions, and he was very happy. Big Meat Shield, take a look at the forum. Lil Bei Li, who was standing at the side, poked Lu Wu and said. Lu Wu looked at her with a puzzled expression. You'll know when you see it. Lu Wu immediately opened the battle forum and began to scan the popular posts on the main page. Soon, he knew what Lil Bei Li was referring to. This was a post that was posted not long ago, but a large number of players were paying attention to it, and its popularity continued to rise. Who knows what this is? I picked it up from the ruins of the explosion during the last cross-border battle. Is it valuable? Why can't I understand the analysis? Original poster, delicious wine snake, attached picture, colored glass divine seal, level 2 divine state. Item details, extinguished divine seal, contains the power of 3 heaven realm laws. The description of this item was vague, and its specific effects were unknown. The players were now discussing it in the post. Crayon_Shinchan. From a professional point of view, just by looking at the 2 words divine state hanging behind this item, it's not that simple. I think it could be sold for at least 100,000 soul coins. Although you don't know its specific effects, don't sell it. Otherwise, if you know its specific effects when the version is updated, you might regret it. Laughing emoji. After all, during the early days of the battle forum, a bunch of people chose to sell spiritual materials in the shop, and they were selling it at 1/10 of the current market price. They were happy at that time, but now they are probably regretting it. Laughing emoji. Of course, you can be cautious and sell it in advance, because this item might not be valuable after the version update. The sooner you sell it, the sooner you can enjoy it. Laughing emoji. Shueli_the_strongest. I don't think this item is valuable. It can't be eaten, nor can it be used as an equipment. It's also not a material needed for alchemy or forging. I don't think it's useful. The above is just my personal guess. Invincible_loneliness. A divine state item is definitely not simple. I think it might be useful in the future. Does the original poster have any thoughts of selling it? Contact me privately if you do. Sea King's Meditation. JPG, watermelon_taro. Why do you guys pick up such good stuff so casually? Look at what I've picked up. Pile of ashes, white. Item introduction. There should be 3 owners of this pile of ashes, but now they seem to have merged together. Hairy Man and Wind replied to watermelon_taro. Ah, you're a genius. People pick up their equipment after the explosion, but you picked up a pile of ashes. It's AF * King fusion of 3 people's ashes. You're a genius. Crayon_Shinchan replied to watermelon_taro. You can make use of the waste. It's a white quality material after all. You can ask a blacksmith to make a white quality ashes blade for you. Although the quality of this weapon is not high, it might be the first equipment above level 400 in the entire server. After all, the owners of these ashes were existences above the realm of Ghost Emperor and Ghost King. Laughing emoji. A cup of iced cola replied to Crayon_Shinchan. Are you trying to make me laugh to death? What kind of F * King ash weapon is this? Ha ha ha. Peppa_Boar, stop fooling around. Hurry up and at the dog official. Ask him to come out and explain what this color glaze seal is. Immortal Warrior, Battle Official, Pokemon Master, Battle Official, Roasting Chong, Ewall hugging the Jade Rabbit, Battle Official. Since the discussion could not come to a conclusion, the players started to Lu Wu's alternate account in the official forum, hoping that he would come out and explain. However, Lu Wu remained silent. When he saw this godly seal, he was dumbfounded at first. The players might not know the value of this thing, but how could he not know? Similar to the underworld, every godly seal in the heavenly realm also represented a deity. One could imagine its value. However, Luwu was puzzled. During the cross-border war, the strongest opponent, Kufeng, was only at the demigod realm. How did this godly seal appear in the cross-border war? Thinking of this, Luwu focused his attention on the colored glaze seal stored in a player's channel and began to investigate its details. The artifact's deduction function was activated at this moment. At the same time, the soul coins in the inventory began to burn violently. Immediately, an image appeared in front of Luwu's eyes, and it began to advance rapidly. After a while, Luwu, who had deduced the specific information about this godly seal, opened his eyes. After understanding the specific reason, Luwu suddenly did not know whether to laugh or cry. It turned out that the previous owner of this godly seal was a very ordinary, celestial disciple in the heavenly realm. He obtained this godly seal by chance and accidentally activated it. Then, this celestial disciple's life changed drastically. With the godly seal, he could understand high-level celestial techniques that he did not even dare to think about before. He could also observe the trajectory of the rules through the godly seal, come into contact with the power of the rules, and understand the preliminary imprint of the rules. It could be said that this celestial disciple's cultivation had been turned on, and his future was even more promising. However, he was very careful. He knew that it was a crime to have a treasure, so he hid this godly seal without letting anyone know. He planned to integrate it into his body bit by bit, and chose to keep a low profile before he had absolute strength. According to the normal development of the plot, a guy like this who obtained a cheat and knew how to keep a low profile would usually grow into a big boss. However, at this time, the cultivation talent that he displayed was recognized by the higher-ups, namely Kufeng. He was originally a reserve member and was transferred to the team that transported the supplies. From this moment on, the guy who obtained the cheat was destined to be a tragedy. Under the attack of Niefeng's Krypton gold bomb, this guy with a bright future could not withstand it and evaporated on the spot. However, the godly seal was left behind, and it was picked up by the player who posted this post during the chaos. After understanding the specific reason, Luwu did not know whether to laugh or cry. He had obtained a cheat, but he did not expect his life to end in such a way. It could be said that his death was insignificant, and it did not match the characteristics of a big boss with an alloy finger at all. It was too King tragic. Luwu wanted to make a sad expression, but when he thought of the fact that the heavenly realm had lost an extremely important godly seal recorded on the investiture of the gods in this battle, he could not help but laugh out loud. It was too tragic. Ha ha ha. Chapter 642. Just as the players in the forum were discussing the specific functions of the colored glaze divine seal, a game notification rang in the mind of the player who posted the thread. Game notification. You have triggered a hidden quest. Please submit the colored glaze divine seal to the butler of the Mansion of the Dead to activate the hidden quest line. After completing all the quests, you will receive a high reward and a hidden character class reward probability to obtain. After reading the game notification, the player was completely stunned. Originally, he had planned to sell the colored glazed divine seal to Guyu. After all, he could not resist the price of 100,000 soul coins. However, when he saw the game notification that there was a probability to obtain a hidden character class quest, he replied Guyu without hesitation. Boss, I'm not selling it. After that, the player ran to the Mansion of the Dead and handed the colored glazed divine seal to the butler of the Mansion of the Dead. He then received a quest line from him. Then, he happily started his journey of the hidden quest. While the player was overjoyed, Luwu was also in a good mood. In fact, the colored glazed divine seal was not very useful to the players. This was because the player's cultivation system was completely different from that of the heavenly realm. It was impossible to become a god by absorbing this seal, let alone get on the investiture of the gods. However, it was different for Luwu because he could maximize the value of this seal. Meanwhile, in the artifact space, a green divine seal was shining brightly with the infusion of soul power. The power of the rule within it was completely awakened at this moment. Seeing this, Lu Wu and Lil Bei Li, who were standing at the side, smiled. Big meat shield. Let's start making our own investiture of the gods. Lil Bailey suddenly turned to look at Lu Wu and said. Lu Wu nodded excitedly upon hearing that. He then took out his wall-mounted booklet and placed it on top of the godly seal. What should I do next? Lu Wu turned to look at Lil Bei Li and asked. Leave it to me, just watch. Lil Bei Li said as she took a step forward. She came to the front of the divine seal, took out her small notebook, and tore out 3 pages. At this moment, a large number of soul coins in the artifact space turned into a blue river and engulfed the 3 pages in Lil Bei Li's hand. Then, the 3 pages started burning violently. In the midst of the burning, twisted black runes emerged from within. Under Lil Bei Li's manipulation, they quickly flowed into Lu Wu's wall-hanging handbook. At this moment, the wall booklet began to change and began to devour the glass divine seal below. Lu Wu smirked as he witnessed the scene. The heaven realm had the investiture of gods, and the underworld realm had the god list. This time, he would also have his own god list. Time ticked by, and soon half a day had passed. However, the devouring did not end. It continued. Looking at the soul coins in his inventory, Lu Wu's face revealed a pained expression. Needless to say, the amount of soul coins consumed in this process was too large. If it wasn't for the plundering of a batch of resources from the heaven realm, they might not have enough soul coins. However, Lu Wu felt much better when he thought of the godly list that he was about to obtain. Half a day passed as they waited, and the devouring process was finally coming to an end. At this moment, Lu Wu's wall-hanging handbook had changed drastically. It was dark gold in color, and it was emitting a dark red glow. It looked like a rare treasure. When the last green glow of the glass divine seal was devoured by the wall-hanging handbook, the dark gold handbook glowed and slowly floated into Lu Wu's hand. Unnamed, incomplete god list. Item introduction. The investiture of gods rules the power of the 3 realms. The holder of this item can confer amnesty to the gods and establish an immortal orthodoxy. Current members of the investiture of gods. 1 member, evil god. Evil king rules mastered. Immortal rule, blood sacrifice rule, ghost spirit rule, netherworld rule, concealment rule unsealed power of law, glaze law internal rules, 6/6000. Holding the god list, Lu Wu was overwhelmed with emotions. In fact, the idea of setting up a god list that belonged to the players had been around for a long time. However, it was never implemented. This was because the prerequisite for building a god list was to possess at least 3,000 rules. The investiture of gods in the heaven realm had 3,000 rules, and the underworld god list was also built with 3,000 rules. If Lu Wu wanted to build a god list that belonged to the players, he would need the support of 3,000 rules to build a complete rule cycle system. However, the problem was how to obtain 3,000 rules. Back in the human world, the path of becoming a god was based on the physical body. However, this path was not suitable for the players now. This problem had been bothering Lu Wu for a long time. As the players grew stronger, they would reach the demigod realm sooner or later. However, at that time, they could not be conferred as gods on the god list like the heaven realm and the underworld realm, because there was no god list that could support them. However, Lu Wu had found a way out now. It was to create a god list that combined the rules of the heaven realm and the underworld realm and contained 6,000 rules. This path was very similar to the one taken in the human world. If they could not produce spiritual energy, they would absorb the spiritual energy from the heaven realm and the underworld realm to cultivate. Lu Wu chose a more thorough path this time. He integrated the rules and created a god list that was stronger than the heaven realm and the underworld realm. Lu Wu had asked Lil Bei Li if this would affect the 3 realms. Lil Bei Li said that there was no problem at all. This was because what they needed to do was not to extract the rules of the heaven realm and the underworld realm, but to cultivate new rules. For example, Lil Bei Li extracted 5 rules from the evil demon god's god seal and supported the evil king. These 5 rules were not the main rules of the system. They were just marks. Their disappearance had no effect on the three realms. However, Lil Bailey had a way to cultivate these 5 rules into the main rules that could be the same as the main rules of the system. In other words, Luwu needed to seize the main rules of the system owned by the Great Emperor of the Heaven Realm or the Underworld Emperor. He only needed to obtain the rule marks and cultivate them into the main rules of the system with his soul power. Therefore, this would not affect the normal operation of the 3 realms. However, the rule marks that could be derived from the main rules of the system were not unlimited. According to Lil Bailey, each main rules of the system could produce up to 108 rule marks. At this time, Luwu's god list had devoured the Glaze God seal of the Heaven Realm, which meant that the Heaven Realm had permanently lost the Glaze God seal. As for the 5 rule marks left by the evil demon god, Luwu would consider returning them when he cultivated the main rules of the system, but there was no way he could return them to the Heaven Realm. Not only would he not return them, Luwu was already thinking about how to kill a group of Heaven Realm gods to enrich the rules in his god list. After all, Luwu wanted to take the path of merging the 6,000 rules of the 2 realms. No god would give him their rule mark for free, so he could only steal it. Thinking of this, Luwu had a strange expression on his face. The way the players grew was through stealing. He did not expect that the future gods would also be stealing from others. This was very logical and in line with the player's actual situation. Big Meat Shield, start your journey of collecting rules. At this time, Lil Bailey clenched her fist and gave him an encouraging look. Luwu rolled his eyes. There are only 6 rule marks now. Do you have a way to quickly collect them? Yes. Lil Bailey nodded vigorously. Tell me. First of all, you have to understand that what we want is not the main rules of the system, but the power of the rules. Now, there are players who have mastered the power of the rules, such as that bomber. He has the dark rule mark in his body. When the time comes, you can secretly take some out, and we will use soul coins to cultivate the power of the dark rule into the rule mark. Lil Bailey paused for a moment before continuing. Of course, it's better to have a ready-made rule mark because the soul coins needed to cultivate it are very large. As long as we have the ready-made rule mark, we don't need to spend a lot of soul coins to cultivate it bit by bit. We can catalyze it into the system of the system in one go. Hearing Lil Bailey's explanation, Luwu nodded in agreement. He had just consumed 5 billion soul coins to devour the ready-made colored glaze god seal. If he really cultivated the power of the rules into the rule mark, the soul power consumed in the process would be even greater than devouring it. Therefore, it was better to do it in one go and devour the seal after plundering it. This way, he could save himself a huge consumption step. As for how to cultivate the seal into the system of the system of the system in the future, Luwu did not think about it for now. The main reason was that he was poor and could not afford to cultivate it. However, Luwu was not worried. When the players could slay the gods, Luwu would receive an unimaginable amount of soul coins for every god they slain. As long as the players continue to grow, the income of soul coins would continue to increase. By the time the players could ascend to godhood, the soul coins they earned every day would naturally be enough for Luwu to cultivate the main Body's Law series. At the thought of this, Luwu began to hope that the players would become stronger. My journey of collecting Pokemon. The gathering of rules will have to depend on you gods slaying. At this moment, Luwu really wanted to make a server announcement. Do you want the treasure? It's with the gods. Go kill the gods. After fantasizing for a while, Luwu turned to Lil Bailey and said, "What name do you think I should give my little notebook hanging on the wall? Think of it yourself. You even need me to think of a name. What's the point of having a boss like you?" Lil Bailey immediately showed a look of disdain. Luwu smiled awkwardly when he heard that. Then he started to think hard. Leaks list? Deity list? Calamity rankings? After thinking for a while, Luwu suddenly had a flash of inspiration. At this moment, he thought of the ancestor of the human race, the human sovereign slayer. It seemed that the army that he led was called the extraterrestrial demons, and the human warriors under him were very similar to the players. They grew by plundering and were immortal. What a great material! As a descendant of the human race, let me continue the glory. What do you think of naming it the Heavenly Demon List? Luwu looked at Lil Bei Li and asked. Lil Bei Li did not speak. She picked up the ice cola in her hand and took a sip. Then, her figure slowly faded out of the artifact space. However, before leaving, Luwu saw that Lil Bei Li's hand that was holding the iced cola seemed to be trembling, and her eyes were red. Luwu scratched his head, looking a little confused. After thinking for a while, he decided to name it this way. At this moment, 3 big words slowly appeared on the cover of the dark golden wall notebook. Heavenly Demon List. Chapter 643. While Luwu was feeling happy about the Heavenly Demon List, an inconspicuous livestream in the forum had become the most popular one. It was caused by the player who asked about the function of the colored glaze seal. In order to get the colored glaze seal from him, Luwu activated a quest line with great rewards. After this player received the quest from the Mansion of the Dead's butler, he started a live stream in the forum. This was also the reason why his live stream could become the most popular one at this stage. The players who watched the live stream came after learning that he could get a hidden character class. They were envious, jealous, and hated themselves for not acting fast enough. However, since this quest line was set up by Luwu on the spot, it was not difficult, just complicated. For example, the first quest line was to help the butler of the Mansion of the Dead find a lost jade pendant. The second quest line was to help the Wood Spirit clan collect 5 spiritual materials. The third quest line was to help the grocery store owner move the goods, and so on. This quest line was extremely complicated, and the only reason why the players kept watching was because of the reward at the end. This quest line lasted for a whole week. During this period, the player worked 24 hours a day, running back and forth across Bakey. He even had to help an NPC fish in the sea occasionally. After many setbacks, he finally completed the quest. The last quest line was the 50th quest line, which was also the end of the quest line. The quest requirement was to test the effect of the newly developed potion for the Rock Ghost King. In this quest, the player died 5 times before the Rock Ghost King finally finished modifying the potion. He also received the final reward of this hidden quest, 50,000 soul coins and a hidden inheritance, Warrior. This inheritance came from the Hall of Valhalla. It was not a very powerful inheritance, and its ability was to create puppet soldiers to fight alongside the player. Even so, the player was extremely satisfied. Although it was only a low-level inheritance, it was still extremely valuable. At this moment, he was secretly glad that he did not choose to sell it for 100,000 soul coins. Otherwise, he would not have gotten the hidden character class. While the players on the forum were envious, they also understood one thing. The function of the godly seal was to hand it over to the butler of the Mansion of the Dead to activate the hidden character class inheritance. At this moment, the players were extremely excited. After 3 years of fighting, there had never been a specific way to get a hidden character class. It was all about luck. However, luck was too elusive. Although the players were eager to get it, they could not do anything about it. But at this moment, they seemed to see a way to get a hidden character class. That was to obtain the Divine Seal. At this time, the players had already linked the Divine Seal to the hidden class. The way to activate this quest was to hand in the Divine Seal. At this moment, a certain big shot behind the scenes smiled. This was because he wanted to ingrain this concept into the hearts of the players. This way, the players would take the initiative to hand over the Divine Seals they obtained to him in the future, enriching the rules contained in his Heavenly Demon List. At the same time, in order to collect more nomological godly seals, Luwu set his sights on the demonic god who was lying dead in the Mansion of the Dead. Since he had started collecting god seals, how could Luwu miss this guy's god seal? Of course, Luwu would not directly plunder the demonic god's godly seal. If he did that, the demonic god would be crippled. His plan was to deduct a bit of the rule power from the demonic god's divine seal and use his own soul coins to cultivate the city divine seal. While the demonic god was unconscious, Luwu took action. To ensure that nothing went wrong, Luwu caught Lil Bei Li, who was snacking outside, and brought her into the artifact space. At this moment, Lil Bailey's face was filled with reluctance. Lu Wu, on the other hand, was very nervous. Following the procedure that Lil Bailey had taught him, he began to control the artifact and entered the demonic god's soul. He then used the artifact to deduct the Black God's seal. At this moment, Lu Wu was very cautious. If he used too much force, he might dig out the entire god's seal from the demonic god's soul. That would be very exciting. Although he had saved a lot of soul coins and did not need to cultivate the god's seal, the demonic god was definitely gone. As an ally, Lu Wu would not be so heartless as to kill the demonic god for his own benefit. However, Lu Wu's trembling hands made him feel that he might accidentally deduct the demonic god's life. At this moment, Lil Bailey, who was watching from the side, could not stand it anymore. She began to teach him personally. The operation on the soul level was extremely complicated. However, with the help of the all-powerful Lil Bailey, Lu Wu still managed to deduct a tiny part of the demonic god's god seal. At this moment, Lu Wu experienced the satisfaction and joy of a life profession player after completing a work. After obtaining the demonic god's god seal, Lu Wu obtained 5 rules: the blood rule, evil rule, hell rule, destruction rule, and emotion rule. According to Lil Bailey, these 5 rules were one of the most powerful rules in the underworld. It could be said that although the demonic god was just an ordinary god, his god seal was extremely powerful. This was because this god seal once belonged to the god of hell, an ancient god from the underworld who almost became an emperor. If it was not for the fact that Lu Wu did not have enough soul coins to cultivate these rules into god seals, he would definitely give himself a set of the demonic god's god seal to strengthen himself. However, Lu Wu felt that since he had the seed of law, all of this was too far away. After starting to collect the rules, Lu Wu's mind was filled with soul coins. Now, he only hoped that the players could carry bricks diligently and earn soul coins to support themselves. Otherwise, he would not be able to live on. Construction required soul coins. The cultivation of the Emperor's mirror required soul coins, and the occasional activities required soul coins. Now, collecting and cultivating the rules contained in the Heavenly Demon list required a huge amount of soul coins. Although the income of soul coins had been increasing, Lu Wu felt that it was not enough. There was only one way to solve this problem, and that was to make the players stronger so that they could earn more soul coins. At this moment, Lu Wu set his sights on the Corpse Clan in the land of Sunluo. In Lu Wu's eyes, the Corpse Clan was just a warehouse of soul coins, not a powerful force. After all, the current strength of the players was not much weaker than the Corpse Clan. More importantly, the players were immortal beings. As long as they continued to consume the soul coins would eventually fall into Lu Wu's hands. But now, he could not wait to speed up the development of the players. After Kufang's death, Lu Wu had an idea. That was to lead the players, Calamity, to attack the Heavenly Realm and give the East Emperor the middle finger. Although he was still far away from this step, he was still a human, and he needed to have a dream, and the players were the foundation for him to realize his dream. Thinking of this, Lu Wu was ready to make a good plan to create a war mission line to annihilate the Corpse Clan. Just as Lu Wu was planning the war quest, something big happened in Naraka. Naraka, Blue Valley Ruins. As the server with the highest survival difficulty, Naraka's players were always wandering around the abyss of death and often fell into it. Compared to other servers, Naraka was also the server with the most intense competition among the local forces. Peace did not exist for Naraka's players. Internal strife and constant external strife were the real situation. However, after the 2 cross-border wars, Naraka ushered in a period of peace. The main reason for this peace was because of the stimulation. In the 2 cross-border wars, Naraka relied on various new weapons developed in collaboration with the super AI, Yak, to make a name for itself. Their overall strength was not much weaker than the European server. But compared to the most powerful server, the gap was still very obvious. Especially Niefeng's 2 Krypton gold skills, both of which ended the war. This stimulated the players of Naraka. After the second cross-border war, Eric agreed to the proposal of cooperation with the U.S. military and began to develop new technological weapons with them. This time, Eric did not hold back. Under the condition that the U.S. military used a large number of spiritual ores as a condition, he published the blueprint of his human mechanization transformation plan. At the same time, Tesla's biohuman transformation plan also had preliminary results and was posted in the Forum of Naraka in the form of a strategy guide. Naraka thus opened the two paths of human transformation and technological development. Under the cooperation and sharing of benefits, Eric also made a suggestion. That was to create a weapon of mass destruction on a massive scale. And Eric had this idea because of Niefeng. After seeing the power of Niefeng's Krypton Gold Bomb, Eric also wanted to create a technological weapon similar to the Krypton Gold Bomb. His first thought was nuclear weapons, but he quickly rejected this kind of weapon because the lethality of nuclear weapons was definitely not as powerful as Niefeng's Krypton Gold Bomb. There were only two main types of lethality of nuclear weapons. 30% of the energy released was radiation, and 70% of the energy was shock wave and heat. But the problem was that most of the monsters in Naraka were creatures that were resistant to high temperatures. Some could even swim in extremely hot magma. Therefore, the lethality of super high temperature was not very practical here. And the second characteristic of nuclear weapons was nuclear radiation. Rather than saying it was lethality, it would be better to say it was a kind of harm. Moreover, with the physique of the monsters in Naraka, the lethality that radiation could bring was too weak. It would not be of much use at all. After some hesitation, Eric gave up on the idea of creating nuclear weapons, because this kind of weapon was not suitable for the environment in Naraka. Especially for those god-level powerhouses, nuclear weapons had too many limitations. But Eric did not give up. He began to look through the database, trying to find a super weapon that could be used in Naraka's war against foreign enemies, just like Niefeng. While searching, Ari found information on a type of superweapon, space-based weapon. It was a weapon system that was deployed in the form of a satellite in the sky. It could attack the ground quickly and accurately, just like the God's Cane. It could use the huge kinetic energy generated by the metal tungsten rod falling from the sky to attack the ground target, and the explosion would be pure lethality. When this suggestion was made by Eric in the meeting, even the U.S. military was shocked. Because of the appearance of space-based weapons, it was necessary to first build a set of positioning system that was equivalent to a GPS. This was an extremely huge project. Moreover, in Naraka's environment, there were all kinds of dangerous creatures in the sky. The space-based weapon might be destroyed in a few days. Regarding this, Eric was once again troubled, but he still did not give up. He was determined to create a superweapon